Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are here with episode 12 of The Off Angle, as Prinogo has very nicely just reminded me to make sure that we get the numbers right. But we are indeed here once again with Yumi, who has been a recurring guest a couple times. And we're back on to talk about this new update, talk all things major. Should be a fun one, I think. We might go for a little while. We'll see where we're at until indeed the wheels fall off. That's what you said earlier, Prinogo, so I'll nick that one away from you. But I wanted to do a nice little check-in, guys, because we've not really done that very much on these episodes. So we'll start with you, Michael. How are you doing? How's your week been? Did you enjoy the major, etc.?
Yeah, no, I was doing some watch parties. I do just kind of like an open-ended thing where people could sort of like jump in and out. There wasn't a lot of streaming. It was just kind of like laid back, off the record, just shooting the shit. And for the week of playoffs, I actually just went up to Yorkshire with my parents and just enjoyed the countryside a little bit, and just going from town to town and caught as much as the major as I could. In the interim, I tried to schedule like we do things in the day, and then during the night the major is on. Please leave me alone. And I feel like we set comfortable boundaries. But yeah, I had a lot of fun for the week of the major.
There you go.
I was given a vision of like a hooded figure of Michael as a hooded figure just started walking off into the woods at night after a seemingly totally reasonable day. That's par for the course. And then he's like, "But leave me alone as I complete my ritual." And then suddenly there was a large Brazilian man also who joined him, and he was like, "I'm going to whip this crowd up. Tomorrow will become hell," or something. I would never understand Portuguese, obviously, so I wouldn't be able to tell you, but that sounds like what happened, right?
Yeah, you've added some strange lore to this book. I don't know if I don't think any of that's canon.
Extended universe stuff, yeah, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
What about you, Dario, mate? How you doing?
Yeah, things have been good. I mean, the major, I don't know if I would classify it as something that I enjoy. I think if you want to really get technical, like my personal lived experience as somebody who's watched Counter-Strike, I started watching in Krakow, and most people think Krakow was like one of the worst majors in terms of like the actual people who played in the playoffs and etc. But I still feel like honestly Krakow was a better viewing experience in general, and I think part of that is going to be biased heavily towards the whole crowd thing, and maybe we'll get into that, maybe we won't. But that's just my first thought when somebody asked me about what the major was. I was like, not actually as good as Krakow, and that was like that was the first one that I had, so maybe it's a bit of a bias there. But I was mostly just walking in like, oh, I guess Gambit must be a really good team because they made it to the final, because I had no idea about anything Counter-Strike, and then here we are. So yeah, I guess by that nature, Outsiders must be a really good team, and I'm sure they'll win a lot of events going forward. What do you guys think?
Maybe. To be fair,
they did win Rotterdam before this.
Yeah, right? I think they've been in a bit of a weird spot because they don't get as many big tournaments as some of the other teams because they're not partnered. So it's like, yeah, they still get to play off against the tier 1 competition because they're usually there anyway. But I'd say 75% of the same. The Blast is kind of the big one, right? That they're not really involved in very much at all. But I don't know, man.
Well,
I don't know.
Wasn't it a sanction that Blast did to make it so that Russian teams can't even participate in the qualifiers to begin with? So it wasn't even, as far as I know, it wasn't even really like they had a chance to qualify through the more open-ended part of the Blast system, which obviously we all know from Snappy Tweets is not exactly open-ended, really. There's a lot of steps you have to jump through. But the fact that they got invited directly as a result of winning the major, at the very least, will fast track them into that position. Even say what you will about all the political shit behind the scenes, at the very least, we will get to see them more, and they will have a chance to prove that they can, legitimize this victory. Because I think in the eyes of a lot of pundits and analysts and fans and even players, they're probably going to be like, "Congratulations," but it was a fluke, and we'll see if that's true. Yeah. I think that's the sane take. This major had no sane results really, but that's the sane takeaway from the major is this must have been like a mad outside result, right? Left field result, and then now we'll see what happens from there.
It does make me wonder whether going into the next year we're going to see the Outsiders still remain as like the brand, like replacement brand for VP, considering that we're starting to see that sort of that veil over the organization lift a little bit with their change in CEO. Like I thought the major was going to be the last time that they're going to be competing under the name Outsiders, but then for Blast they are also the Outsiders still. So
yeah,
it's a strange predicament, but I imagine both the TOs will do like an evaluation on where their stance is going to be regarding VP into the coming.
I mean, I would say if I'm TSM here, if there's still a world in which, outsiders could be for sale, as it were, or, like property that you maybe want to start getting rid of before their value drops or whatever, could be a quick and easy in. I see you shaking your head.
That's way too expensive. They just won the major. Like, they're going to be way too expensive to justify TSM coming in. And I think they've even said, like, strategically, they are looking at a team that is going to be, like, eventually going to be good enough to be tier 1. They're not talking about, like, straight away into the space. I think they are trying to eventually build up something, but who even knows if that's the plan anymore? Considering TSM have lost a major sponsor of theirs, haven't they? So
yeah, they lost the last 3 letters of their org name. So I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yep, and couldn't get rid of them for like 6 hours or whatever. So they were in some weird purgatory on Twitter.
God bless Elon Musk.
Yeah, Jesus, I don't know, mate.
So. Okay, I will say though, Yumi, I do believe that actually outsiders will one day be good enough to win a major, but I don't know if that day's today. That's the only thing I'm saying,
Where does that come from? Like, is that something I said that you're flipping? I'm now kind of lost.
TSM, they want a team that will one day be good enough to be tier 1, and I think outsiders will one day be good enough to be tier 1.
Right.
Yeah, but honestly though, huge accomplishment for James. Finally, I was initially like thinking that this was another Skadoodle MVP case where, like, obviously famously at that Bossa Major, it was like, really, you're gonna give it to Skadoodle? Like, okay, he had like a reasonable finals performance, but like up until then, was he really all that? And so on, and like. I was just really surprised that was the case, and I was thinking, there might have been other more deserving names there. And then, so I thought this was another case of that when James was announced as the MVP, because I was looking at Fame the entire final game, and then even leading up to it, and he was this guy who was like the big storyline, right? But when you actually do sit down and look at James' numbers and you take a look at his performance, it is pretty unreal. When you also factor in he's the IGL and the sort of brain and the identitarian, like he is the identifier for this team. He defines their style, and I know some of those are intangibles and maybe shouldn't factor into an MVP analysis, but if you're going on both storyline to be satisfying and actual performance, I think he checks out every way. And, I was also a VP hater back in the Yakinder days where I was like, really, I don't like watching this team. But you can't deny that the style is successful. And I also think that in general, we are seeing an improvement, I guess, in terms of watchability. You usually don't even think about that as a metric, but we are seeing this team take more interesting engagements and maybe set up to be more imperious initially so that they don't have to save as often or in as many circumstances as they once did. And even on the T side, which is a real accomplishment as well, because this was the tournament of shit T sides. I tweeted this out multiple times. This is the tournament where everybody collapsed on T side, except for a very select few teams like Mouz and Outsiders. And I think that is an accomplishment you can write home about.
I don't think that's exclusive to this major, though. I mean, Antwerp was kind of the same story, unfortunately. Like, CT sides were just dominant, and it's almost gotten more extreme for some reason coming into this major. So
yes,
I mean that'll lead us into future discussions, I'm sure. But I think that's like I love that you're sort of bringing up that they've sort of developed into being a bit more watchable as a squad, because they have made changes to the system over the very, very long period that they have existed. Some of that's been to do with new players. Some of that's also been to do with they might not have found their style to be all too sustainable. Like, if they weren't winning anything before, there's obviously something wrong with their percentage game that they kept playing every single time. So they have actually gone with, like, they go with rush plays now. They sometimes go off of, like, spawn-based picks. And the scary thing for teams moving forward is that, like, okay, maybe this might be a fluke major, but considering outsiders have done this for such a long stretch using just one system, who's to know whether they're going to regress to that or whether they're going to continue, like, making these small improvements? They're still going to be quite a hard team to read or play against moving into the future, because they are adding these small little details that might just come out in your game where you debut against them. Like, who knows if they've got more tricks up their sleeve, because they don't reveal a whole lot. They're a team that do keep their cards quite close to the chest.
Yeah, I think I'd say as well, there's definitely been a step up in, like, the individuality for me. Yakindar is one thing, right, where obviously losing him looks to be a pretty big deal. We'll see what happens over on Liquid. They don't make Legend stage here, right, and all this. He's not... I thought he was going to farm this event based on how Pro League looked for him, but he's dipped. instead of continuing to peak or whatever, or even just plateauing. It was, a bit of a dip, and maybe that's to allow the rest of the team in, and all this kind of stuff. And also, as you start to turn a few heads as a player like Yekindar, a player that has that sort of style, I think people are going to pay a bit more attention, But the big thing for me with Outsiders, I get the loss of him, sure, but the team in general has had this, if they can keep playing to this level again, right? Is it a world tournament? Is it a live tournament? Or is it now a sign of what's to come for players like Fame and Flit and even Norbert in a certain sense, who is more of like the supportive element? And I think that it has flipped a little bit because previously you maybe have like your Kindar finding space, and if you can't find space, then they start to doubt the round. Because I think in the past, especially when it's Buster and Sanji in there, that like they couldn't really close out these rounds, but now I feel like they have a bit more close going for them because they have more firepower across the board rather than maybe just looking at a James, just looking at him and Yekindar, or one of the two of them to do something within a round. They have a little bit more consistency, and maybe that takes the pressure off of James as a player, so he can work a bit more on the calling, because I think that was a big thing. Well, maybe stick on the Outsiders for now, but the big thing for the two teams in the finals was the IGLs seem to just, those two teams seem to have a read on every team they played against. They didn't necessarily, play off against like the world-class IGLs that were also at this event, like a Carrigan or whatever, because, those teams went in the bin and they just managed to kind of avoid them. But the Spirit game for Heroic, the Mouz game for James, I would say, those are very fresh in the memory of people. And then James, even to a certain extent in the final, just completely outcalling their opposition, But I do think that this Outsiders looks a bit scarier because, Yekindar feels like a big name, feels like there's a lot of potential there. We might not get to see it actualized, to be fair. I think Liquid is still a good team for him to join, but I think he has maybe taken the angle of, there's a bit more money available in North America or whatever, right? And he's maybe not... Oh, it might have been his only option. I don't know, right? But I think there was maybe better teams that he perhaps could have joined. But Outsiders as an ilk, as a 5-man unit, look a lot better, I think, at least on an individual level. And I think that that's really kind of helped them just add a little bit more of this dynamicism where it's like, we can't risk losing Yekindar super early in a round, so can we go for a rush? Maybe not. Maybe he needs to, work it himself and find a bit of space, or indeed, like I say, closing out the rounds looks a hell of a lot cleaner, I think, for them with this new lineup.
Yeah, I also wonder whether the loss of Yekindar is just something that's benefited the team, because I actually think he's probably quite a vocal person. We've seen how that's reflected in the Liquid dynamic. And I imagine as the sort of dedicated entry playmaker type player that he is, he actually wanted to make some calls that were maybe something against the ethos of what James wanted, or maybe he was given enough room to sort of facilitate that. Now it feels like James is still the sort of central control operator for this squad. And I actually would liken them very similarly, like the way they approach map control, kind of similar to Cloud9, like the way that they would sort of attack on T sides. I think it was Hobbit that went on the desk and sort of confirmed my theory on how they approach it, because they seem to have like an A extremities player, a B extremities player, and then a mid dominator, and then they sort of bounce ideas based on what they're seeing or what they're feeling for that side of the map, and then that would sort of placate into the later stages of the round. This does feel like James is just kind of moving all the knobs and going like, yeah, you know what, you go entry this round, and they'll go do it. Like, I think that he is the one voice that everybody is listening to on that team, as opposed to maybe having a few different cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, maybe a bit more buy-in as well, I think. Is
especially now, right?
Well, yeah, definitely, but I think that's...
I mean,
that's
win Rotterdam first, and then everybody's really sold in your team.
But yeah, I think that's definitely a good point, that it's like, yeah, Yekindar is a bit more vocal, has the, backing, I suppose, the ability to be a bit more vocal as well. And certainly the way that he plays, where it's like, okay, this round I want to go for this because I feel like I can abuse their... B play because they keep pushing off of B. So if I, whatever, right? But yeah, I think that maybe bringing in a few more sort of tier 2 guys, some younger guys, they are immediately just going to be on your system. And maybe that has been missing a little bit, where it's like, okay, because I don't think this was something that James employed straight away. Obviously, they made a final before in 2019, right? And it's like, I don't think they were really necessarily playing that style throughout that major. where they were sort of on this saving, on this percentage base. They had we call them the Avangar smokes on the, rest in peace Dust 2. They did have a little bit of innovation in there. But it wasn't on this kind of level. So maybe as he starts to develop this idea or whatever, it's like, I've been running the numbers, guys. And, you've got Buster and Sanji and Kickit in the team who are a little bit like, whatever, dude, whatever, guy, Adren's still in there as well. There's this guy's got the experience or whatever. And I don't know that they'd necessarily bought in. And maybe Kicker is the guy that's always backed him. That's why he's still here. But certainly, I think
lesson for the younger players who might think to usurp the throne.
Well, indeed.
you gotta stay true, loyal to the end.
Yeah.
I think something interesting as well. Is just like the idea that you want more evidence of development. They had like comparably they were almost the same team as Fours back in the day with exit power and just giving him an AWP every single round.
Yeah.
The old version of this team had Sanji. That was the piggyback. Like, they have changed their ethos. They go for retakes. They actually do saves. Like, it's not the same team as Once Upon a Time where, the major that they made before, like, Berlin? I think it was the Berlin major?
They made the finals.
I mean, maybe that one was even more of a fluke than even this finals run that we've seen them go on now.
Yeah, well, this is the event. This is the major where, even though they made playoffs in Stockholm, I was pretty certain that like the other teams on their side of the bracket were destined to get farther than them. You think about Heroic and G2, and it's like, I'm not really sold on VP at the time being able to like contend with these teams to the same degree. This is, of course, still with Ykinder in the lineup for clarity. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, and maybe that was even with Sanji, or maybe that was the event that they had Flit come in like right before. I can't remember if that was Antwerp or Stockholm.
That was Stockholm.
That was Stockholm. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was like breakout success with a new player who obviously like had been targeted previously by Navi, if people aren't remember, and was like that whole scene. The Forza team in particular, if anybody doesn't know, just like some of the people where you talk to them about like, would you like to join another team? And they're like, well, my soul is indebted to Forza, so I will not be doing that. Whatever. Like that's it. That's almost what they're saying is what it feels
Send
like.
help.
Yeah. Blinking in Morse code here. So I don't know what the hell's going on over there, but I do think that when they add Flit, their ceiling goes up, and then you think their ceiling drops when they lose Ykinder, but as Yumi was saying, like that allows them to potentially be more focused and more uniform in the way that they approach things, right? So they can work together on something in a way that I'm not necessarily alleging that Ykinder was working against them, but it's more like everybody can sort of fall in line. And this is what Skriv was saying too about like these people are probably going to be on the side of Jaime in this case always, and like he's one of the most experienced players left on the roster at this point, probably the most experienced alongside Kicker. And it's like, you wouldn't expect necessarily like headstrong, star players such as Ykinder, who seems to be proving himself as like a secondary caller and like a powerful voice within teams and stuff. You wouldn't expect him to just say, okay, yes. And maybe it's not always a good thing to say, okay, yes, but this particular style and this particular mix of players were able to catch fire. The other narrative I've seen a lot of people grasp on is like with not just outsiders, but also Mouz obviously making it pretty deep in this major. And, there's a couple of other examples, big with a stand-in, obviously, who were 2 and 3 in this legend stage. It's one of those cases where you really do look to, like, is this the future of Counter-Strike, right? Like, and Furia, obviously, everybody would have put them above Imperial. But the fact that they really did it on home soil and went far deeper than Imperial ever could have hoped to is like, okay, passing of the torch and, like, the next generation. I think that's a weaker angle, but people keep bringing it up because, obviously, it was a Brazilian major. When you look at that, it's like, okay, well, we are starting to see this Academy League bear fruit in a real environment at a World Championship event. And there is a degree to which, obviously, the big teams failed to make it to the next stage. Obviously, we lost Vitality, we lost Navi in quarters, we lost FaZe 0-3. And there's a lot of whack stuff that happened as a result of the format and as a result of those upsets. But when you actually sit down and the dust settles, you look at the standings afterwards, you are seeing some pretty significant first steps for some of these players in their career towards real greatness. And like the fact that Sin could have maybe helped Big get to a playoffs at a major for his first major, and the idea as a stand-in where he wasn't even supposed to be there. Like, I don't even know if he got a sticker. I still don't think he did. And like, that's just like, that sucks, obviously, but it's like, These are like crazy situations to be thrust into, even if you are like on the team and supposed to be there, like the Mouse Sport squad, right? It's like it is really wild. And at the very least, even though you expect the big dogs to come back fighting in future events, you can still look to this event and say, okay, well, one storyline that is positive for the future is we can still have, you know, games where large amounts of skill and strategy are on display, despite the fact that a lot of the players are actually quite young and inexperienced. And again, you expect them to crumble, but if they don't, or if they're up against other people who are also expected to crumble, like maybe it evens out, and you are going to see like the sort of cream rise to the top, as it were.
Yeah, it's strange because I actually just didn't anticipate Mouz were going to continue performing as well as they
Yeah,
did the
me
entire
neither.
tournament. Like they just kept doing better and better. And I was always one of the big advocates for when Dexter first joined this team. I don't think a lot of people bought into him as an in-game leader, like didn't believe in him at all, because they go from Carrigan, who has a rapport and had, you know, won tournaments with them, to now a guy that comes from Australia where, you know, he's still learning some of the European style and system. I remember they were even still trying to flex this idea of like, oh, we've got a 7-map pool. And then they dropped that very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, they were just like, oh, yeah, actually, no, we still paid Overpass, in fact. So, yeah, it's just, it was an odd time. And so now, like, this actually does feel like the Mouse team in particular do feel like a team that have fully sort of adopted and been integrated into the Cyclone Dexter system that they've got going on. Like that just seems to be how that development path seems to emerge. And I always do wonder when it comes to like the academy team and the main squad, how much is sort of trickled down into the academy team, so that when they are ready and they are, you know, called upon, it isn't as hard of a fit. You know, it's kind of it's a gear made of different material, but it should still fit in the machine.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're on the We Play Academy League and you are still, when we're thinking of like the LAN finals and stuff, these are cases where you're getting stage experience. Yes, it's an Academy League. Yes, it's not the same as a major, but it still kind of prepares you. Instead of going in completely dry, you have no idea what's happening. Like you can walk in and actually be able to maybe do something with the fact that you have a little bit of past experience to draw upon. And I think that probably did make a pretty massive difference for a lot of the players here. But also, you know, it's hard to know. Obviously, the Mouz, I think it was the Mouz Outsiders game, had a lot of controversial, shall we say, takes, or just there was like, you know, images of a seemingly empty arena, and you know, from maybe it's from the right angles, maybe it's cherry picked. I wasn't there. I can't tell you. But one of the things that I did notice is like a lot of people were saying like, well, imagine how it must feel for Mouz and Outsiders. So I was like, well, you know, on the one hand, there's not nearly as much pressure if it's not fucking loud as all hell, you know. So like maybe that's maybe there's like, you know, yeah, you would love to be like celebrated and like to not hear Furia chants while you're playing the game, but like, you know, still you can say something about that. You can still enjoy something about that. There's many things to cover, and a lot of them maybe they've been covered elsewhere already. You know, we are like
Sure.
Skriv said, we're a bit removed to it, but it's just one of those things where it's like I think for these guys, they were able to get some pretty crucial experience for their future endeavors. The fact that Mouz made it as far as they did is honestly shocking. And but this is also the way it's supposed to be. Like a lot of people doubted Mouz, a lot of people doubted Dexter. Dexter, sorry, I have to be very precise with my pronunciation, because why? I don't know why people can't come up with a better name. But so Dexter, yeah, he's come over, he's flown over from Australia, leaves his kids behind, yada yada, and then now he's here, and it's like he was supposed to be doubted. He hadn't been proven at a top level, and then, you know, now he's got all these new players, and they're supposed to be doubted because they haven't been proven at a top level. And Cyclone is like bringing in people from the Academy League, and that seems weird, and maybe even like a little corrupt or whatever. And it's like, what's even happening? Like this is all supposed to be thoughts people have, is like, what is happening? Why are these, like, how are these people actually having any success? Surely they fall off, and now they haven't, even at a major. And that is remarkable, and that's something that they can take to the bank. But that is sort of the life cycle of an up and comer, even just an individual player. You think about like a Zywoo or somebody, right? It's like these kinds of players, as rare as they may be, these kinds of success stories, as infrequent as they may be, they are supposed to go this way, where you doubt them until they make you believe. And I suppose Mouz have made a lot of people believe, right? So
yeah,
props to them.
I think it's a really cool time, because we've chatted a little bit about this on some of the shows or whatever, where I think that, you know, we're seeing like a G2 and a FaZe and a Vitality, right? You've got sort of these, I would say a lot of them are veteran players, and I think that they're in this weird, they're not, you know, quite retiring just yet. Maybe, there's a couple of them in there that are at the age where some players have retired, but, the role, Carrigan's an obvious one where it's like the role can kind of help him out a little bit if he doesn't need to be fragging, but then does he? Because they went 0-3, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that we're looking at a fair gap in the middle, in that sort of like 23 to like 27 age range. I think that there's going to be a few players in the next few years that just kind of suddenly drop off, because they're not quite figured. And then you have the younger players as well. It's kind of this. I think it's a lot in sports, especially sports where it's like solo competitors, like a tennis or boxing or whatever, where year on year kind of thing, but you only maybe see the effect of it every 10 years when, the world champion finally retires, and then there's the, next up and coming greatest of that era or whatever. But every 10 years, I would say that they get better and better and better, right? Like boxing is kind of a classic where, Ali is like, oh, well, there's one angle of their context and all this. Is he the greatest ever? But Mike Tyson is a better boxer than Ali, right? And then Mike Tyson probably couldn't match off against like Tyson Fury, who's fucking 7 foot tall, because everyone's just so tall in the heavyweight class now and all this kind of stuff. So I think we're starting to see a little bit of that where you've got these 16, 17, 18-year-olds coming in like a Xertion or whatever. Is it Exertion or is it Xertion? I've always gone with Xertion, but I heard Exertion was the...
I heard, so apparently he says it Exertion,
Right,
though it doesn't really make sense that way.
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, good player, so that's fine.
Good player, shit name.
Sure,
Blonsky?
I mean, we've got plenty of that.
9x.
Steam guard code.
Yeah.
Who is that? Wait, there is actually a Steam guard code. It's
Yeah,
Kazakh player?
XGV25 or something, right?
Yeah, something like that. It's definitely X5 at the start, because that's all I
Yeah.
call him on a cast.
Oh,
I
right,
don't give him
yes.
his full
X5.
name. I just call him X5.
Yeah, buddy, change your name if you want name privileges.
Yeah,
Get off my cast.
Come on now. Like, I can't, in the heat of the moment, 1v3, I can't say his full name. Shout out
You
team,
could just.
team
I
time,
honestly want somebody to just start actually calling him Steam Guard and just be like,
Yeah, well,
and Steam Guard gets a
is he-
3K.
he was on like K23, right? I don't know if he's still
Yeah.
even
I don't know
playing
where he's at now,
with
but
them, so might be the last we've seen of him, unfortunately. Yeah, so we'll never get to know. But yeah, I just want to shout out Tea Time really quickly. There was a 1v3 the other day. We were casting Paloma, and they like bug out the ESL HUD for some reason. They must have not sent their Steam IDs, so it literally just says Paloma for every player, so you don't know. So we used the default. We used the they were in the final, I think, or like semi-finals of last season, and it was a very interesting experience for, I think it was like Mike and Alan casting it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we used the in-game HUD. We're not using the custom HUD, throwing it back a few years. And I think it was Olymp who plays for that team or whatever, which is already an interesting enough name and kind of difficult to say in the heat of the moment. But his ESEA name or whatever is like X9D744 or something like this, right?
Okay.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And we'd not really checked, and it was like the second round, and he was in a 1v3 but with this name, and Tea Time like just sort of, you can tell like the cogs went or whatever. He's like looked down on the HUD to check the name, check who it is, to be like, oh, now we've got whoever in the clutch.
Yeah.
And he just went, what is this guy's name? Just like gonna start this clutch. It was gold. It was fantastic, because it was like right at the start of the game,
Yeah.
man, doing anything. So
Yeah.
What were you smiling
now-
about, you? That's the question.
Now the issue is I went on a tangent about Tea Time. Funny story, funny anecdote.
Yeah.
What was I talking about before that? Because I don't remember.
We were talking about we talked about X5 a little bit.
Yeah.
That was why.
Casting.
Yeah.
What was before that?
I guess are we talking
Oh,
about that
and we talking about
region?
Xertion. It was
Yeah,
Xertion or
Xertion.
Exertion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exertion.
And we,
Yeah,
we're
okay.
talking
you
about
said he
Mouz
was a
and
good
Xertion,
player, and Mouz was a good team.
So, all right, to bring it back in, I think we'll just have to say, Michael dropped out, so we had to wait a couple minutes. That's why there's a jump cut here, guys. Yeah. So it's absolutely fine. Happens to the best of us, or the worst, as the case may be.
Fucking.
Whoa! Jesus Christ! Holy shit! Holy shit! Okay. Why have I just nearly fallen off my chair? Oh, because my wheel's fallen out, bro. Oh, God.
Dude, you almost had a Vu moment.
Yeah, I did. Hold on. Give me a sec to just pop this back.
and guys, this is what another jump cut here because Skriv YouM3 dropped out, but Skriv actually dropped, so that's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, what was it? Freakazoid? I think I also had that before.
Yeah,
where he just like leant back in the chair and just like, broke.
Well, I have the banger. That's so. Yeah, because we'll probably just have to cut again. To be fair.
No, just
gotta leave my own in. You know, my nasty joke. Sorry. Anyway. What a mess has just occurred. Thank God it's all at the same time, I suppose. But yeah, when I bought this chair, you know, like 200 quid office chair or whatever. So it's, I don't know, I guess it's like a Herman Miller Light or whatever. And it's good. It's served me a long time, you know. But within like the first 2 weeks, one of the trucks, one of the wheels, just started coming apart, and like I guess it just wasn't stuck. So I've bought some on Amazon. This is like duct taping it, right? Bought some on Amazon, but they don't fit. They don't take in the hole. So it just kind of sits in the hole. So I guess I must have moved forward or something, because every now and then if I like lift the chair up or, you know, move, it'll just fall out.
Just all the wheels come off.
No, it's literally just one wheel.
Oh, just the one. Okay.
Yeah, it was just one wheel that was faulty or whatever, which makes it kind of even more annoying. So I don't know when that's come out, but I didn't full on fall. That would have been a clippable moment, but
Indeed.
It was instant karma as well. I've just decided to throw a burn in there and nearly fallen off my chair. So, you know.
Yeah, laughing at your own joke as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like the
very good.
Nice 1-2 punch there.
Yeah. Michael wins in the end. Okay. So I guess to bring us back in here, guys, we've had a bit of a mare a couple times there. You know, technical issues, physical issues, whatever. Happens. We were talking about this idea of I guess it's sort of like compounding interest, you know, where it's like the idea you've got these like generations of talent, and I think that we're moving into a new generation of talent. Maybe the major will be an outlier. Maybe I'll get, you know, proven wrong very quickly when Mouz go 13th to 16th of the next big event, you know. But I do think that we are starting to see some of that kind of, you got these guys who've been playing since they were like 6, and maybe by the time they turn, you know, they get into their teens, they're like, actually, I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I'll give it a go and, you know, try and go pro in between my school studies and just hold off on university or whatever for a little bit and see how far we can get. Yeah, I think we're seeing some of those players come in. Munisi is quite an obvious one. Didn't make it to the major necessarily, but I think that's also a conversation about just putting superstars in a team and hoping that it'll work. Whereas the Mouz NXT, they've got all these young players, but they've got all these players that work, you know, and fit in quite nicely. And Exertion proved to a lot of people that he's pretty hot property, and a lot of people on the logic of Munisi, on the logic of let's, you know, bring in some more firepower because we just need bigger numbers, said that he should have been one of the first players to be added to this team, right? Get rid of Abimus, or when MBK was having his troubles or whatever, get this guy in because he's really hot. And they didn't go about it in that way. They went about it in a bit more of a, you know, worked out approach, as it were. And that's obviously paid off for them, because this is not the first event that they've done well at, that they've kind of overperformed at, right? They also overperformed at Cologne, which was another slightly weird event with Astralis also making semis and everything, right? So yeah, I think the Mouz system, the Mouz players, it's a testament to the changing of the guard is maybe the phrase that will get thrown around, and then also indeed working out a team, working out a system. Outsiders also play into that fact, and I think gone are the days, because it's funny how the top team, especially if it's a big org, can really influence the rest of the field, right? We had FaZe come in and it's like, yo, firepower, you know, just all the guns, all the numbers, all the ability, all the talent. And then they won a major, and, you know, they very nearly had like one of the most successful years in Counter-Strike.
That's probably still the most successful year. I mean,
true, that is true.
Like, well, okay, maybe not. I can't remember if Astralis won every top tier event that they went to when they were on their streak.
I think they had a couple liquids, you know, a couple liquid games, or they got knocked out by a team
by
that
somebody else, like a Vitality
Liquid
maybe,
can beat or
probably.
whatever. Yeah, that kind of thing. But
But
definitely,
yeah, very nearly, like you're saying.
yeah. Well, I think FaZe definitely missed out on the opportunity to solidify that for years to come, because there might be a team that comes along that does the same thing, or you know, actually pulls it off and gets the sort of 4 or 5 big tournaments of the year to prove that they are the undisputed best team of the entire year. But yeah, so I think that we're maybe moving away from that, because G2 sort of tried to copy their system a little bit with, you know, just plugging firepower in. And I don't know. It's gone, because look, there's a world where you say, oh, Mouz, you know, they make playoffs, that outsiders winning the major, that should never happen, and you know, Heroic don't crumble in the playoffs. Whoa, this is all. But going 0-3, you know what I mean? Getting knocked out by BNE, for goodness sake. Right,
Who then,
and then
get knocked out immediately after, right?
Yeah, right,
It's not
exactly.
even like they did an inspired run. That's the thing, is what
Yeah.
defines an era for most people is like not just you winning everything, but if you don't win, you had to be taken down for somebody else to win. Like the who took you down was the one who made it to the finals and took the trophy or whatever. That obviously didn't happen here, right? BNE just got immediately ditched. You know, followed them on.
I
the
think
plane.
most people said that. Like, I won't pretend like, you know, after this game, it's like, wow, I can't wait for BNE to go 1-3 now. You know, like genuinely, that there wasn't really a road for them. They either come in all guns blazing and they make it somehow 3-0, or maybe make it to like the 2-0 games immediately. But if they start down the dumps, like, I don't think people have that much faith in the roster to sort of overperform. Like, they're very explosive, but
Yes.
if they don't have the ignition at the start of the stage, then there is no boom.
There you go. Succinct and true and real, as Trav would say. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I just think that you know, teams like that maybe do have a bit of reflection to be done. I mean, we had Vu on last time, and he was proven perfectly right when he was like, you know, is everyone or are the people in the roles on FaZe, are any of them number 1 in the world in their roles? Probably not, right? They're all good. They're all towards the top end, and maybe on their best day they can contend for that. But especially at this tournament and coming into it, you know, I don't think that people necessarily had them pinned. And you know, the vibe was going into it most wide open major ever and all that good stuff. But yeah, they're not. They're obviously the big one that sticks out, but they're not the only one. I think that Vitality let us down. They were looking like they were on a good run of form. Liquid even not making it into the playoff stage. Na'Vi, I don't know. I think it's a tough one, to be fair. Like, they got the brunt of the, you know, 18,000 versus 5 versus 6 kind of vibe, unfortunately. And I would imagine, yeah, even like Blade trying to get in and give them some sort of feedback or whatever, very difficult to hear your teammates. Plays into Furia's playstyle perfectly as well. I think that's another big thing, that, you know, if it were Imperial there, for example, the way that they approach the game is very different to the way that Art would just love to use the fact that sound is nullified to go running in with a Mac 10 and all this kind of shit. And that also seemed like the only way that a lot of teams could win T rounds, actually, was running in like headless chickens sometimes with the SMGs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Still, I think that they want to get back to being one of the best teams in the world, they'd have to put a team like Furia away, even with all that wave of sound. But yeah, so there were a lot of big teams that kind of just were flat. And then, you know, it's like Cloud9, what happened there kind of thing, right? And all these teams just kind of really had like major fuck ups at some point, you know, whether it's the entire tournament itself or whether it's getting knocked out by, you know, a less scary team than you'd expect. So yeah.
I mean, that was some of the conversation. You're saying Liquid disappointed, but some of the conversation was around whether or not he played up for the rehearsals versus getting now the part. Like, he's now sort of underachieving or not. I guess now that he's got like a better rapport with these guys, might even feel like some of his words have to be a little bit more. He has to be a bit more careful because it has maybe potentially longer implications with how the chemistry works in the roster. Like, there's a lot of sort of internal affairs that end up happening in teams. Like, you have to be able to establish a very clear hierarchy, just in terms of who contributes into rounds, but also outside of the game, like who has the commanding presence and voice those are things that people have to consider as well, because it's no different from like regular sports. There's usually captains, like maybe co-captains or second in commands, and then subordinates. That's usually how it armies and sports work in general. You want your troops to fall in line when shit gets tough, basically. So just on Liquid, I thought I'd throw that out there. Also, let's not forget that Hooksy G2 was just kind of a joke to a certain degree. Like the Giga
Yeah,
Chad
I would
stuff,
agree with that,
the Giga Chad shit, sure, fine. People really like that. I like when the community has fun. That's all good. But let's not pretend like he didn't have to like undergo a massive transformation to even kill people in the server, let alone bring in like a structure that was supposed to influence all the other players that ended up just kind of deteriorating in the end anyway. It's like, oh yeah, we'll add a bunch of structure in all these games. Oh, it didn't work. And now we're back to let's just go kill people. It looked like it was totally redundant, this whole experiment. So I mean, I said it before, I thought Hooksy was a stopover in-game leader because they didn't like the Alexi thing, and Hooksy was on the market. And now that they basically they massively underperformed at this event, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Hooksy just gets the boot and we start rebuilding elsewhere. You know, it's a lot of these teams will have to think about whether they want to undergo these changes, because the Blast Major will come rather quickly. You know, we're going to enter a player break after all the Blast events at the tail end of this year, and then we're going to have France coming up. You know, so.
Well,
yeah, and I mean
the unspoken thing that Skriv was sort of touching on about like all these teams that are going to rebuild and all these teams that are like, are they going to re-examine themselves and reflect on what they could do better? The thing that really sticks out to me is that if you didn't make it to this major at all, like a G2 or an Astralis, you must be kicking yourselves because fucking Outsiders won the whole event, dude. Like this could have honestly been any like top team or top orgs major to go for. You could at least, you know, have gotten, obviously there's like the sticker money financial side of it. You could at least have made a playoffs run. You could have at least made yourself feel like a contender again, even if you weren't genuinely like an Astralis, right? Or even if you weren't necessarily going to be a top team with this exact 5-man lineup like G2. You could have at least done that. You could have at least done something for your reputation as a team and like continue to do it. The fact that so like those two squads in particular really stick out to my mind is like you guys not even making it to this major is a real like shocker to me, and it really could have been a completely different story had you guys managed to come here and do something. Like you think about the skill on G2, you think about the veterancy on Astralis. I don't necessarily rate like their 5-man units and their composition and their strategies. I think obviously Hooksy's a meme, and I think the Glaive is not necessarily the guy who you look for like modern day innovations on Counter-Strike, which is one of the main reasons why Astralis was so good back in the day. And so I feel like there has been a pretty big drop off for both of those rosters. But when you look at what they are capable of doing, at the very least, like, I mean, Astralis is on LAN with like some rejig of Zipix's role apparently, and they're defeating Ents, and that's obviously happening in Finland right now. And that's that's wild, you know.
We have to point out, you know, for balance, that they did get shit on by 500, who are like ex-Skade or whatever.
Yep.
Which is a team.
Yeah, well, those guys, listen, the Skade guys could have turned it on anytime they wanted to, and when they decided not to, it was because there was another reason for them to not.
Right.
If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know what I'm saying. So, but yeah, the thing about the just to finish the G2 point, it's like.
Sure.
Like they could have done something here pretty massively, and this it showed based on the output, this was anybody's major to win. And so the idea that you were just going to go about that and say like, oh shit, here's this major that we didn't even make. Like, yeah, you do need to think about what that means. And I think I agree with Yumi's point about Hooksy being a stopgap IGL that's just here to like fill the role or whatever. I also think that the fact that Xtaz is now out of the team, when by his own word, it was not Nico, but it was Xtaz who disagreed with Alexi B. And now that's why Alexi B was gone. Alexi B at least got nipped to the major. Yeah, they didn't really do too hot once they were there. But like, you at least saw him at the major. Obviously, there's the other storyline of every ex-Copenhagen Flames team player made it to the major, except for Hooksy, who was like probably the most lock one that you would think. Because like 2 of them are on Fnatic. One of them went to, I think, Sprout, right? And I don't remember.
Yeah.
But, like, that's...
Heroic.
Oh, yeah, of course, Heroic, yeah. No. Well, there you go. One of them even made it to the finals. Dude, what are you doing, Hooksy? What are you doing? No, but seriously, it's like, I honestly, the G2 thing just gets funnier and also dumber the longer things go. And it's like the more far removed you get from the initial move to Hooksy, like minus Alexa plus Hooksy, that's shocking move, and really was not a good idea. So and now we know that it's like pretty much obvious that with Xtaz out, and with also their general manager being swapped, like this team is doing exactly what Skriv said. They're reflecting and rebuilding. It seems to be what they're going to do.
The leaf seems to be gone, basically, in who they had people in charge, like the people that were in charge before.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a curious case that it's maybe, they didn't want to get rid of Alexi B. And it was Xtaz that wanted to get rid of Alexi B.
Yeah, this time he refused to go to Costa Coffee with him.
And Xtaz wasn't bought into the Hooksy system, and that's why he's gone.
Well, what is the Hooksy system exactly? I guess it's like Twitter impressions.
That is a really good question, yeah. Yeah.
And then, not hitting shots.
I'm sure if they could answer that, they might have won the major. They might have even been there. So maybe they themselves don't even know.
They might have even been there.
Yeah. I mean, G2 is a different case. We'll see what happens with... so the big one is the Blast World Finals is maybe our next, big... I don't know. The 4 finals are pretty decent. There's a pretty good crop of teams there as well. But the World Finals, it's kind of interesting because I think the World Finals as well has a few teams in there that secured their spot when they were in form. Like a Na'Vi, like a FaZe. So it'd be kind of interesting to see whether they can still, perform to that level that got them there at the actual event. And then for me, I think it's like, this will be the telling event where if outsiders come in and they kind of clean house a little bit, or they win again, or whatever, or a FaZe checks out again, then I think that we'll see some kind of serious rebuilds. If not, they might try and, as you would, right, be like, well, I know it was the major, but it was kind of a one-off fluky event from us, so we'll stick with what we've got. But I think Na'Vi, big wake up, also for them in a sense. They've got to sort this 5th position. They've maybe got to sort, like the IGL. And I'd nab Patsy, bro. That's what I'd do. Get rid of some Die Young. He's not really on the team technically. Get this Patsy kid, see what's up. Let Electronic fully IGL rather than trying to have to frag as well, and go from there. I reckon that could be a move for Nav. Is it wild? I don't know. Let's throw that out there. What do you reckon? Minus SDY plus Patsy.
I mean, I like Patsy a lot because they're very just raw entry fraggers in general are just they're fun to watch, and usually their work is, I guess, it is overblown to a certain degree. Like people will go oh my god, he's such a star, he's such a stud because he's opening up rounds.
Yeah, sure.
Especially with save meta becoming a thing. It's you got those 2 kills, round is done. So I like Patsy a lot, but I also just don't think that Na'Vi are going to make that move simply because they have seen a tendency to pick up, or at least a bias to picking up Ukrainian players.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be where their head is at the moment, organizationally. And Patsy doesn't fall under that. So I think Spirit will want to hold on to him as well. So I don't see that move happening as much as you might want it.
Fair enough.
The Spirit org is a bit confusing because it wasn't that long ago that I feel like it was this org. Didn't they potentially transfer list their entire team or something, and then it just didn't go anywhere?
Yeah, that was a year ago when they were on the rebuild. Yeah, with Mir and Chopper, and then they played an event with Siren and Patsy, I think, in the team, some of these players. No Chopper or whatever, and then they got ruined. I think it was the DreamHack that we did, Michael, in would have been about a year ago this month.
And they transfer listed SDY as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Part of it.
Yeah, and they just got ruined. They got 16-0'd actually by Fours, I think, so not even one of the biggest teams at the tournament. And then sort of brought half the players that they used for that event, and then Chopper came back in, and then Mir actually left and went to Entropic, and then SDY was in limbo for a bit. Dexter, obviously.
Yeah, what do you guys think of all this Dexter talk? Because obviously Dexter, he caught some flack because of his tweets about the crashing and his max FPS being whatever. And
dude, I'd be pissed too.
Yeah, well, he caught flack for that. But in addition to that, where people were obviously Sponge on the Talking Counter show was it was talking about you're just lying about the team of people helping you and stuff. And then in addition to this, every single fucking interview that even tangentially touched on Dexter for like, I want to say a solid week on HLTV was like, Dexter is too obnoxious or too boisterous or like talks too much or has too much of an ego or he was actually a bad thing for our system or like you can clearly see based on his current play that he's not good enough to be as like they all of these takes, right? Like it felt like there was almost a press offensive against this guy, obviously inadvertently in this case, but it's just like wild how many of his like former teammates and people who had like past dealings with him were like, yeah, miss me with Dexter. I don't want anything to do with that guy or whatever.
I mean, he probably has quite like a combative personality to a certain degree. That wouldn't surprise me. But I also think like that whole angle and him talking about how like there were a lot of crashes at this event and they had to deal with a lot on the OG side. I think it's totally reasonable. Like they were a team that I think got affected by it like 3 times, different crashing events, sometimes in like critical moments in rounds as well of the game, which is like it's totally ridiculous. And yeah, Dexter is probably overinflating it, saying like, oh, they're not helping me, and oh, it's only they're blaming our configs, and you know, I don't doubt that he's overblowing that part of the situation, but they were the team that was the most fucked over, I think, by these issues. So yeah, I think a lot of them would go on the offensive to a certain degree. Maybe they should have handled it in back room, but they have a right to be upset about it. It'll be like if your side of the basketball court was wet all the time because the system, like, or the fucking sweeper people weren't cleaning up the sweat, you know, like you would be just as angry at the way the event is being run because it's working against you, and it shouldn't be something you have to think about at all. So I get it. Like I get where everybody's coming from, especially when they're working the event and they just want it to be like a nice smooth show, everything like that. And Dexter probably was being a bit of a tit, but I think he has a certain right to be to a degree, you know, like there shouldn't be crashes on a major platform on land. Like that just shouldn't be something you have to worry about.
Yeah,
and part of that is his config in one case, and that was like the really long, like I think 2-hour case or whatever it was, where they like swapped out PC, monitor, etc., and it was still happening.
But then why does his config then work at other events and not this one?
Yeah, it must be something specific to the specs or whatever. I think I was hearing that like because the systems were too powerful combined with this, that's why it was happening. This is causing issues. But either way, whatever the case may be, like obviously CS:GO is mysterious at the best of times as to why it breaks.
Well, my game runs like shit right now, so maybe I need to ask for Dexter's config if he's getting too many frames that his shit is crashing. You know, like fuck me.
Yeah.
That is funny.
We should all be so lucky, but that seems to be what was happening anyway. That's a good meme though. Like the idea of them trying to spin the narrative afterwards. It's just our computers were too powerful. That's why here at ESL we were having issues. Yeah. I mean, obviously the Fnatic case was egregious because how can players accidentally kick out the entire power cable powering everything for their whole setup or whatever? Like how is that even possible? There was the stage delay. I think it was on the finals where Outsiders had there was some issue with the screen. They whipped out some classic electrical tape. Fix that issue. That was a good one.
There were
I don't know. There were a fair few. Thankfully, most of them were resolved by the time like Legend Stage and playoffs started. But you also have to think like OG were moments away from eliminating Vitality in the 2-2 game at before the Contender stage ended, or Challenger stage, whatever. I don't remember all of these names, but the one before the playoffs, and so that stage had Vitality and OG in the 2-2 bracket, and they were really close to eliminate. We almost had OG in instead of Vitality. That would have been an interesting moment, but also probably, I mean, it's not like Vitality went on to do anything other than contribute to FaZe's downfall later on in the event. But yeah, I don't know. I think we talk about the format extensively with Vu, Skriv?
Not really. Not really,
No?
to be fair. I think we did a little
the first
bit
round matchups being a little fucked because
format.
of
I think we talked
Yeah.
about like seeding and we did a little bit. I think at that time we were in limbo with maybe getting Lurpus involved to really go deep.
Oh right.
So I don't think we wanted to waste that content, as it were.
Yeah. Well, briefly, I will just say this format is cheeks and should be.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
this is
in
the
theory,
same.
It works very well.
Yeah. This is the same point. I don't know if but this is what I said last time. I don't know if you're going to kind of agree with this here, Michael. But it's just because it got, for me, it's just because it got stretched to its extreme because we had good teams play like shit in the first stage. So, they therefore went on I think the argument really that a lot of people had that perhaps the logic is that we should reseed going in, but then, you know, it's like someone's going to get shafted there. A BNE who went 3-0 in that first stage are going to get shafted for playing well, and it's like, well, you know, technically you played off against only the 30th best and the 22nd best and then 18th. You know, you've not really played many great teams, whereas someone like Cloud9, even though they did kind of shit, they played against higher ranked teams than you did, and all this kind of... It's like, you're never going to please everyone, and, you know, obviously, like, I think we're very much in the improvement mindset, right? It can always get better and all this kind of stuff, but I think it's just a tough one that, unfortunately, for this major, we have it stretched to the extreme because a team like Cloud9, for example, had clearly felt like they were confident enough in their own game that they should be able to sail through the first stage. They'd put a lot of work into the bigger teams. That showed up in the second stage because they went 3-0 there. And then they went on, you know, through to playoffs, and arguably a bit disappointing in playoffs, but making playoffs is the goal for that team. And they managed to work their system and maybe indeed a little bit. But it's like, look, I get that we get big teams playing off against each other in those opening matchups. As you know, the big one was Cloud9 Na'Vi. Everyone was like, what the fuck? But
and then it was FaZe Vitality later on in the event too, after FaZe Cloud9.
Yeah, they both went 3-2, didn't they, in that first stage? But I think ultimately it's like, it's not like these teams are going to want to get there, right? I don't know. It's a really, really weird one. It's like maybe we could have changed it on the fly to build our storylines, but at the same time, the storyline of the major for me is all about the openness and the what can happen and the, you know, this, that, and the other.
Let's not also pretend like any other like group stage or qualifying tournament doesn't have like if you place first or second, you get a better placement in the next phase versus if you just scrape through like fourth out of your group. That is exactly how those formats are designed.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't just ignore one stage just because a team that we think should be like based on previous results or the world ranking or HLTV rankings or whatever the fuck, that we should reseed then to sort of prop them up into the next stage. Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous the first rounds happened that way, but it's the team's fault that happened. That's the only way that you can unfortunately frame it. Like if you play good and you make it out of your group, like sure you might end up 2-1 or you might end up 3-0 or you might end up 3-0 or 2-1 in that first stage, because the 2-0 game is usually quite difficult because the best teams get to the 2-0 stage sometimes, but not always. So in theory, you should still go in 3-1, and you're still not going to be seeded against the best team in the next stage. But if you just barely scrape through, yeah, you are the shit pick that the big team is supposed to then pound on. I don't see anything wrong with that, to be honest. Like, I get that the big teams underperformed, but it's their underperformance that fucks the format. That's all it does. And like I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not a little annoyed that we have a Blast internalized system and like franchise system and an ESL franchise system where these guys do get inflated ranking points for both of these leagues. Not totally artificially. Like if you play bad in these leagues, you do get tanked a bit. But if you get one win, or if you just barely scrape out of the bottom rung, you're getting enough points to keep your ranking high on HLTV. So if we're just going to reseed based off those types of rankings again, we're just going to end up in a situation where we have another event where we are propping up these teams based on the fact that they are participants in franchise leagues, based on the fact that they are participants in more events than some of the other teams that are going to be in contention with. Like, we might not know these teams as well, but they might just play better. And I would much rather the major circuit be a closed loop that we then judge our performance metrics on moving into further rounds. I would just prefer that in general.
The biggest issue I have with the idea that this is a fair system and it's based on the fact that things are open, and if you just play worse, then you're going to get a worse take of it in the later stages, is that as soon as any externalities appear, you're fucked, because now your format doesn't work at all. As soon as you get a crash in overtime between Cloud9 and Greyhound, Well, now we have to call that result into question, and that's Cloud9 going down in the beginning of the game, in the whole tournament. As soon as we get any Brazilian crowd deciding to cheer for one particular team more than another, especially when their opponents are flanking, well, that could potentially throw something into chaos. That could potentially invalidate some part of the integrity of the result. We don't know how much. We don't even know if it really did affect anything. Obviously, Cloud9 could have closed against Greyhound before it went into OT and so many other things. But the point is,
they
as
turned
soon
off
as
the mini map in the arena.
Yeah.
That way.
Well, yeah, that's an egregious case, obviously. But like, as soon as you get into these situations where it's not as cut and dry as we would like it to be in a more scientific, like on paper, this works this way, it starts to throw everything into chaos. And if we're going to go a step further and think about like how these teams are, you have to remember that this whole challenger stage, this first phase of the tournament, we used to be the minor or the major qualifier, whatever you want to use the term for it. It used to be this thing that you would do to, once you win, you get seeded into the tournament, right? You get pushed into the tournament, and it's not really directly linked in the same way. So now that that's been different, we've lost one of the original elements of what this whole tournament used to be, which is, yes, it's a celebration of Counter-Strike, and you want to get to as deep as you can into this whole sequence, in this whole circuit. But if you make it out of the minor or the major qualifier, or as it's now called the challenger stage, your reward is being able to continue playing in the major or getting to the major back in the day, right? As we separated it differently then. That is your reward. Like, you don't necessarily, I don't even need to see a consistent like causal chain between BNE going 3-0 and, you know, them arriving in the next phase. Would it be interesting, or is it somehow like more fair, or some other some other beneficial aspect of the whole format if BNE gets some sort of advantage for going 3-0? Yeah, maybe that's something that we can argue about, but I feel like as it stands, there's already an advantage for a smaller org getting deeper into the tournament, regardless of how they go there. And really, I don't necessarily know that even makes sense for like playoffs, right? I don't know that it's the same qualification in the same kind of way, right? It's not like we're skipping a whole phase of quarterfinals to semifinals or what have you if you go 3-0 in there. So there's a question as to like how we're seeding that. And if it's still within the internal format of like this tournament is like in a vacuum, and well, your results here are what dictates your placements in the future stages, that can get really hairy, as we saw in this case. And I just don't think it's a stable format for what's supposed to be the world championship of the whole game. And if you're going to talk about reseeding, you don't have to use HLTV points, right? I would actually advise people don't use HLTV rankings. They can be good, but as you're saying, Yumi, they are inflated by playing blast qualifiers and group stages that are designed to maximize match times and running times and all of these other things. You can just have the team seed each other. You can have an expert panel of analysts that can go back into their experience of what got these teams here to begin with, and they can take into account both the professional scene as it writ large at tier 1 and also the qualifiers and the results previously. Maybe you won't get as great results as should be. Like maybe it won't in actuality be a proper real ranking from 1 to 18 or 1 to 16 or whatever it is. Like that might be true, but it would, I think, almost always consistently yield better results than the edge cases that can happen at a world championship. And I just feel like there's a reason why a lot of people, myself included, would put this up there as one of the worst majors that we've seen in the whole game, or that I've personally seen, right, as I said at the beginning of the episode. And it's not because the format can not ever deliver great results. Obviously, we've seen quality majors using the same format, but I do think that this is the wake-up call. It could get even worse than this in the future. So maybe I do think something needs to change. And I guess Valve kind of agrees about the RMR side of things, which we talked about when you were on last, Yumi, about how like Astralis almost failed to even get to the RMR when they had to use all 4 attempts and all that stuff. Valve have changed that, or they're going to reveal more details about how they're changing that. So that's interesting. And that's something that, we could obviously talk about when we get more details about it. But I also want to see some changes to this format. I also think, just on the one hand, like when you stop getting excellent results out of a format for a world championship that's supposed to be a representation of excellence, and we know that we're not really getting excellent results just intuitively, but we will get confirmed that when Mouz don't win the next tournament, when Outsiders don't win the next tournament, when Heroic continue falling off against tier 1 teams, we're going to know that this was a bit of an outside shot. This was a bit of a fluke, and this is not the format to get really, really good stuff. So when we consider all of that, I do think that's a signal to change the format. That's a signal to say it's time to go stress excellence again. Let's go think about how this can be improved. And And yeah, I mean, I obviously love the idea that it's open. I had the cheeky tweet where I said, "Oh, the team made it to the major finals with no organization. That's crazy." But seriously though, like that is something that's possible with CS:GO, and that's not possible anywhere else. So I do want to keep that, but something needs to be done about the fact that a single upset early in the tournament can just fuck everything for the rest.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just kind of thinking as you were talking as well. I'm not really sure. Like the RMRs, I think maybe should be kind of closer or just ultimately directly involved in the major itself. Get like everyone to just play in the RMR, and rather than getting your skipper stage for performing well or whatever, you just kind of move on to the next stage or you get knocked out. And then it's like the whole thing's a bit of a brawl, really. Because I feel like at the moment, maybe the fact that the RMR isn't so close is so that we can get stickers sorted. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really sure why the RMR isn't tacked on as close as possible to where the major's at. Builds a bit of hype, I guess. But I feel like it could be a bit better if actually instead of an RMR, which stands, by the way, for Regional Major Ranking, which is not a name for an event. Like it you know what I mean? It all just feels a bit off that it's like, oh, we've got the IEM Rio. They did call it the Road to Rio, to be fair. They kind of, tried to, but the IEM Rio, Road to Rio, whatever, RMR is sort of like, it's not really an event name. So there's a lot of things that I think need to get sorted out, and I think that we also, it's a bit of a competition kind of thing, because really, I'm not super familiar, but let's say League of Legends has cracked the Worlds format and it's really good. We could yoink that, but then Valve are just gonna, obviously get ousted as yoinking another organizer's format, right? Which is never really going to be. So there is also that it's like they want to get a bit of individuality going and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know. There's definitely different ways. Maybe we should have a bit of experimentation. Maybe we should try on the circuited events, an ESL event or whatever, with a similar amount of teams, let's say a Cologne. We could try doing a different format, things that spring to mind, like, say, getting rid of the RMRs and just have it completely open. Once you've qualified through the closed qualifiers or whatever, I guess the RMR is the closed qualifier. So once you've qualified, you just play off against everyone. But then there's also people would quite like to be able to skip a few stages if you perform well at the last major, which seems to be what Valve are edging towards here, is that you won't have to qualify at all again. Maybe you get a spot in the RMR, it sounds like. I think there's space to edit, to change, maybe throw in a fucking group stage, with actual groups, not just like, the teams that maybe we split people into A, B, and C. Don't know, but I think that I'm kind of on board with the idea that a change is maybe needed. But at the same time, we've just seen the extreme of it at this event because the storylines didn't work out the way that we, the community, wanted them to. So there is that as well.
I will say when I saw that they were changing the way that they sort of invite, or I guess deal with teams that are in more or I guess are more active in the circuit and are playing in more tournaments, and how they sort of implement them into the open qualifiers, I did sort of knee-jerk go like, here we go, we're propping up the franchise leagues again, grr. But the more I think about it, depending on how they structure these out, this actually might be more punishing for those teams even still, because if they're getting direct invitations into the closed qualifiers, how many closed qualifiers are they going to run? And do these teams that are, high ranked and should be doing quite well, are they then only going to get one or maybe two chances to get through to the next stage? So in some ways, depending on how this is revealed and how the format works out, this actually could work against these teams that are still playing up, and they're like, oh, thank goodness they're saving us from the potential Astralis situation. But if you shoot the bet at your one close qualifier, it might be worse. You might have wished you went through the open qualifiers of the old system instead. So it's just something that we could look at, and maybe we'll reflect on it when more is revealed about the system. But it's I don't think people are really thinking that it might just be a deeper boot up the rear end.
Yeah, I don't know. That's true. I was just going to say they could open with the closed qualifier. Maybe. Yeah. If we are, and obviously we'll talk about the update in a little bit here, but if Valve are to be trusted as making sense and knowing what the scene wants and what they're doing, which I don't know. It's like I would put just based off what you're saying, I'd put the closed qualifiers first. I know it's a bit backwards, and then
Well, no, they said that these close qualifiers they will compete against teams from an open qualifier.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, that's kind of the tough thing then, isn't it? Really.
Well,
'Cause-
you only have
open qualifiers to the closed qualifiers, and then they've got open qualifiers to the main event. I don't know. Maybe that's how they do it.
Yeah, like who knows?
How many qualifiers can we fit in?
Who?
Yeah,
knows?
they
I think they're also.
Qualifier 16.
I think this is just kind of a post, blog post or whatever. There is like, guys, we hear you. You know, format a bit weird. RMRs, they need some work, but we don't really know how. You know, that's kind of how it is. Like, we don't know quite what to change, but something needs changing, and it seems like the thing that would have the least, the smallest ripple effect would be changing the open qualification system. Because, there's always a team that cheats. There's always a team that just fucking peaks every angle dry or whatever. And it's like, this is not really how Counter-Strike is played. This is just cheese. So you can kind of feel for Astralis in a sense that it's like, they nearly bottled it, but also Los Kergutos or whatever they're called, these guys don't let go of W. Like, unironically, they don't let go of W.
Oh yeah, to be fair, we were just talking about how like, oh yeah, B&E defeat phase and then get banged out immediately. That is what would have happened to Los Kergutos. Let's be fair. Like if they bang out Astralis multiple times and they actually make it to the major instead of them, or the qualifier rather instead of them, they make it to the RMR. I'm not picking them to go far either. That being said, neither did Astralis. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
They called it Made of Madness for this major. Well, they weren't wrong, I guess. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely kind of a fun time. I guess we can move a little bit more onto the event, right? We've talked results and Ripple and what's gonna happen now and all this kind of stuff, right? Will Outsiders. So we've kind of done all that, and I think that's fair. And obviously, as said, we're a little further removed to that whole kind of idea of like what happened to FaZe and all this. It's like it's been done, it's been talked over. We can essentially, they shit the bed. That's what we can add. So in terms of the event itself, I think I'm very yin and yang with this one, to be honest, in terms of the viewer experience I'm talking about, right? Like the broadcast and everything. Because I think a lot of what ESL did on the broadcast was kind of cool. Bringing in players onto the desk, the two desks and all this, feeling a bit more official on the A and the B stream. Bit of swapping up. Telestrator segments were decent. But at the same time, even on kind of the inverse, I watched the final with my mum. Shout out my mum one time. And,
thank you, Mrs. Skriv.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, so, and, obviously she's very supportive of what I do and all this, but she doesn't have the biggest idea of what's going on. It's very kind of, point and shoot is sort of what she gets, but the economy system, it's all over the head, as you would expect, and that's completely fair enough. But we will watch it, and there was a segment like before the final. Now, they were having these tech issues before the final got kicked off, if you remember. So that's fair. But Yanko went to do like a Telestrator segment. It didn't really work. And then they like cut back to the desk and he wasn't there and it was on the wide shot. And then he just sort of walked in and put his headset back on. So there's still a few things that need working out. The second thing as well, there's only so many cutaways I can handle, guys. You know what I mean? Like to attractive women and to potential kiss cams. That even they'd done it so much that the fucking crowd stopped caring. Because there was always this, you cut to two people, it's like, whoa, hey, eventually there was like 10 people doing it. You know what I mean? Like when it came on, everyone just sort of checked out. I think we had way too much of that. It's like you got a new toy and you kind of playing with it a little bit too much. And also it's like...
But enough about those attractive women, Skriv. Come
on. But the thing is, it's like, I understand where, you're coming from this angle of like, football crowd and all this, and but you have to find out where to put them. Yeah, and I hope it does come out in the feedback. I hope that they can have these types of conversations, because we talk about an awful lot when it comes to ESL. We talk about cutting away from bomb diffusers, cutting away from the start of the round and all this to crowds.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have to figure out where to put it. In football, which is a classic and what we're trying to, this Brazilian crowd is very similar to or whatever. It'll come when there is downtime, and there is clear downtime in conventional sports. The difficulty with CS as a starter and esports in general, there is not a lot of downtime, because the idea is that you're meant to be keeping the dopamine of a player like topped up, right?
Sure.
So there's not a lot of downtime. So it's going to be difficult to throw those moments in. Ultimately, they should come in like tactical timeouts. They should come in tech timeouts, and then maybe in a freeze time when you're going into like an eco round. So it doesn't really fucking matter what anyone buys. Yeah. And then perhaps, if a caster or whatever says, oh shit, they're actually forcing when we didn't expect this, then you'll cut back into the game. But for the most part, when it's like, I don't want to see, we've just had 4 people on the CT side survive. Okay, I know how this goes. I know what their buy looks like. And then on the T side, it's like, we got 2 P250s, whatever. I don't need to see that. Fair enough. Cut to your crowd then. But we obviously had an incredibly egregious moment where Perfecto, I think it was like a 1v3, clutched out, got on the bomb, looked like he'd done it. They cut away, but actually he hadn't done it because there was no time on the bomb. And then we cut back into the game just as it kind of explodes because, Sponge is like, whoa, what's going on? What's going on? And it's like, come on, guy. We should see this guy defuse anyway if he's even done it. Like, let's get the closure of this clutch, to full fruition. So that was certainly something that kind of pissed me off, that we maybe had a bit of a trigger-happy producer somewhere or whatever, just kind of like, all right, and there's another one, and kiss cam, or whatever. And it was like, come on. It got a little bit much, I think. And it took away from a few moments. Like I say, that was the biggest one, but there was definitely a few in there that cut away. So that, again, feeds into this idea that we are still learning. There's some cool ideas. Great to hear from players. Great to get them on. Everybody loves James because that fucking, that what am I doing here? This is cringe, is honestly, that is amazing because it's so true. He's, he's given you a human moment because he's literally just been, you need to go on the desk for an interview. Right, and then they're sort of like,
well, it was like, congratulations, you won the major. Also, we're bombarding you with information. Go to the desk. Yeah. He was probably just like, where am I going? Exactly, why am I here?
Exactly. And then he gets there, and they're a little bit like, okay, and now comes our segment where we have to do the DHL MVP, and just kind of not really, for like a good 10-15 seconds, Stunner's like setting it up before he brings James into the conversation. So it's like, what am I doing here? I thought we were, and it is also, he's just won. He's just won the major, and it's kind of, That is another, maybe you can argue, do you want to get him on the desk for the more casual? That's really nitpicky, where it's like, okay, maybe we should have, because the thing is as well, when they were, the way that it was like set up, the stage looked great, but Heku and Shox trying to get that winners into was so awkward. And she just, Shox is working around the whole team. They're on like this weird like semicircle or whatever. Yeah. And it was like, I get that you're wanting to get these raw reactions as soon as possible, but it just looks so out of place, and again, another event that proves that we do have some learning to do, but there's also been some improvements. I think that absolutely for the group stage games, and absolutely where it's like, BNE getting a win against FaZe and getting Rig on, and getting him to chat and like, did you, and it's like, no, we didn't think we were going to win. And all these kind of like superhuman moments from players that you very rarely hear from. Amazing. But there are some bits that also, what I will say on the telestrator, because I use the telestrator a lot, so I think I got to, point it out, right? It should never be one person. I think that's what I've kind of come to the conclusion. After seeing them do it an awful lot, they did one little segment before the major, the final started, and before the tech issues, so when it was a bit more, right, this is the structure that we're coming in with. And it was like all these graphs and stuff, and then I think there was a little bit of a round breakdown. It was Yanko and Maniac doing that, and the bounce off for them to just play off of each other, especially while one guy's kind of doing the tech stuff, making it a little bit subtle. But when it's just one person, when it was just, Alan and everything, and obviously that's something that he really likes doing and wants to do more of and all this, it is unfortunately unavoidable awkwardness when it's like, and so here's the moment. One sec, it's just not working.
It's not working.
Just one sec. Yeah. And then, trying to draw a circle, I'll be like, circle tool's not working. Let me just go freehand and then draw this like shitty circle. It's actually let me just remove that because that doesn't quite show what I meant, you know, and all this kind of stuff. I think that it has to be two people, or maybe even just like everybody focused on the Telestrator segment or whatever. And you know, you could have Stunner come in from an angle of like, this is the major. Let's, you know, why would he hold his Molotov there instead of throwing it? You know, super basic question that Stunner might have. And Frankie got a lot of praise for that on when she did TI a couple TIs ago or whatever for being the
She also
voice
got a lot of flack for that as
well.
well.
True. But you know, I'd say from people who are here for the entire broadcast or here for someone like me, if I tuned into TI, I don't know what the fuck is going on in Dota, mate. You know what I mean? I have 0 hours in that game, 0 hours watch time. So maybe I might want to have someone like that. But yeah, so that is obviously the area that I'm a bit more kind of passionate about. There's a few producer things that I would have done differently or not done at all. But I do think a lot better than the Pro League product, as we'd hopefully expect. And also PC issues, unfortunately, but not that many broadcast active problems. There's things that you could change, things that you could do differently, but no. Although there was that one time that the PC blue screen, which was quite funny actually. But
they played that off when I think it was Hugo who was like, "Psych."
Yeah,
they just kept going.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing is that, from like a broadcast point of view, like they did a lot of stuff right. Like they're trying to compete with Blast on, you know, the who is the best tournament operator production wise thing, and I think they did a pretty bang up job at this event, all things considered. You know, they tried to take a couple risks. There were, I think, even just like that you know, you're highlighting that Shock's post major interview.
Yes.
Like if you look at how other world championships are structured, like quite often the booths are sort of linked to where the tournament trophy is, and you know they play loads of music, there's like confetti and all this stuff happening and then the team just goes over, you know, they're sort of directed over to the trophy where they can lift it up, and then you can do the post-game interview afterwards instead of trying to catch them before they've lifted the trophy, or you know, trying to get the moments full. Like that feels like something that just was maybe even not even properly discussed to a certain
It doesn't
degree.
feel like it was rehearsed at all. Like they didn't tell the teams, this is where you walk. I mean, okay, I'm going to be honest. Like when Fallen brought out the trophy on the final day, I kind of thought he didn't know where to go with the trophy. Like he was sort of like, he was sort of taking his time. I don't know if he was just like taking it in, you know, but it almost felt like, do I put this in the middle, or, oh, there's a platform. Okay, I'll go over there. Like, you know, that part felt weird, and maybe that's just me reading into it, but that's another case where it's like, obviously it didn't feel like they had rehearsed the whole thing before. So,
but yeah, it's just like small things that looked like you should maybe have it all well structured beforehand, or it just wasn't thought about properly. Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of lessons to learn from events like this. And yeah, I don't think there was much to really complain about on that front when it comes to like the broadcast product and the quality of it all. Also, I like that they're even trying to make the Telestrator stuff work. I know they've tried to do it like challenger level events, and they've had issues implementing it, and it feels like it's a little bit stiff, or the screen's not working or whatever. But yeah, they got it to work. Shout out Alan, I guess, for kind of stepping in and doing that for some of the later games. So cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, think about it. The fact that Anders was signed on as the architect, and then obviously he had to step in for Sadikist after Sadikist pulled a config, after config pulled an Astralis, and then Astralis didn't get to the major. And then obviously Alan and other people were going to take over for the Telestrator segments. And that was, funnily enough, everybody I talked about these Telestrator segments was like, I don't want to see Anders break this down. Get somebody else to do it. And then that is actually what happened. So that was kind of amusing. I will say, you were saying that they're trying to compete with Blast, Yumi. And I think that they communicated to Blast very clearly, very specifically what needs to be done for the Paris Major. And that is a fucking English in-arena broadcast, because that was the main thing that held this event back for me. I don't care about what the games are. I don't care like how silly or how unexpected some of the results are. But honestly, I think the main thing that Skriv is talking about with the production, and Skriv is talking about with like cutting away from the broadcast and stuff, while the casters are sometimes saying, "Oh, I don't know if he has enough time," and trying to carry the hype, and then they just fucking cut away anyways. It's because they're not even thinking about the English arena broadcast to the same degree, right? Like they do have, the observers might respond to them or whatever, but the director might not necessarily, right? The producer might not necessarily. And they're mostly thinking about like who's casting in arena. There's obviously the big giant elephant in the room, not necessarily literally, but you can come to your own conclusions, is that Gallus had to be taken over, like he took over the cast in the arena for the later days. And like fuck whoever was supposed to do the in-arena cast in Portuguese before Gallus, I guess, because this was not his fucking time apparently. Like that must suck. But anyway, like the point I'm getting to here is that the fact that it was in Portuguese instead of in English definitely made the event worse for the English speaking audience and like the broad audience in general, because now there's no crowd play. There's no case where like, oh, the commentators can really talk to the crowd. Like think about a lot of the iconic moments are like, you know, yes, you could have still had iconic crowd moments despite the fact that there was an English broadcast that wasn't even being piped into the arena. But that is a pretty big part of it. Like you think about Machine and any other commentator really saying, let's make some noise, can you hear me, etc. And like that being a part of it. You think about the desk and like the desk being piped into the crowd and like people being able to hear what the desk is saying, and maybe somebody makes a controversial point or a surprising prediction.
Like booing him or something.
Yeah. And you think about like them talking about, oh, look at this map gets picked. By the way, the vetoes in this event, just another event where vetoes apparently don't fucking matter anyway, because we barely show them on the screen. We just flash through them immediately, like super quickly. We were complaining about this with the PGL majors too. Like, why can't we actually have a major where they talk about what the map veto might be for like maybe a minute per analyst at least, and then we see here were the first bans, and then like I don't know, just like to add like 30 seconds between each map veto pick coming out, so that we can actually see, like, it doesn't have to be actually done in real time that slowly. Just give us the drip feed so that we can enjoy like the storyline unfolding and the analysts can react. You can still keep the real-time reaction, but you can actually have some time to unpack details. And what does this mean for the event? And then like you get the fans really involved in that, because that is a significant part. It's just brushed aside for most of the time. So I think there's huge areas of improvement. I think the biggest thing is that I hope Sponge is right from HLTV confirmed that the Paris major will indeed be English in the arena. If that's the case, I mean, Blast basically, that's the easiest way Blast can make it feel like a better event.
I swear there's like a law in France that is like big,
there is,
big events.
But apparently, I mean, Macron was like the reason, part of the reasons why this event is
that guy
happening,
inside, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Or Nell, for that matter.
Well, indeed. Yeah, so I think there's a couple things where definitely I think crowd does make a difference to the way that like the English broadcast is perceived, and then the plays behind it, as it were, right? Because you know, like the great, one of the greatest clutches that never was is the Chris J 1v5 on train, but there was like that ice event or whatever, but there was like no crowd,
yes.
So it's just like, you know, whatever. Etc. Etc. So, and then yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's a bit of a weird one where, as an event, as an international, world famous, you know, is the idea event. It's kind of like ESL, like IEM Rio is supposed to be coming to Brazil. Didn't mean to do that. But in the sense that, you know, the event is meant to come to them, and it's kind of a bit of a, like the F1, you know, it's a bit of a reward. It's cool. We get to witness and all that. But I think we kind of had the inverse, where the Brazilian crowd production and everything was more important, you know, took over in certain aspects. And I think it definitely did affect, certain games. There's so much to unpack here, where it's like, okay, we have crowd effect and language effect and everything, where it's like, you know, sure, Golas is probably not, or whoever's commentating in Portuguese is probably not going to hype up the, you know, opposition's sick play as much as Fallen's sick play or whatever, right? Then we also had the fact that I think we maybe need to figure out how to space these events a little bit better. This is more of, I guess, like a logistical issue with ESL, but they had, you know, fanfare and shops and all this kind of stuff open while the games are going on. And I think that if we remove ourselves from the situation a little bit as, you know, Skriv, Pronogo, and Yumi, and just think of it as like, yo, we're mates, we enjoy CS, let's go to the Brazil major. Why not? Let's take a holiday, you know. And if Outsiders and Mouz were playing, I don't know, James cool or whatever, and, you know, Dexter's got some memes. I love memes, but I don't really want to watch this game so much, right? And if it's on the TV screens anyway, I can just catch it. I'm going to use this time to go get my, you know, phase unique Brazil phase jersey signed by Fallen and Fur, who are legends of the game, and I know them and all this. So we would probably do the same thing, that if there were other, extracurricular things going on, and it's not really the headline matchup of the tournament or of the day even, and we take that time to do other things. Because if we watch all the games, we're not going to have the time to do the other things because it's all going on while the games are happening. I don't know that 100% as fact, but, it makes sense for us, 2 o'clock start, that's what it was, our time or whatever, 11 o'clock start, let's turn up at 10, let's miss the first map or whatever of that quarter semi-final and do some exploration of the arena, whereas it should kind of be the other way, that unfortunately it's like, look, you want to come for your signing session, you got to arrive at 8 o'clock, it shuts at 10, get your ass in those seats for 11 by the time the game starts. So I think there is also a little bit, there's so many different parties and so many different factors here where it's like Brazilian fans, sure, are they going to turn up for the... I think they would have done. I think they would have done if they were, corralled. There's not going to be like a contingent or whatever that's like, we are not watching anyone other than Brazilian teams. Because they did. They watched other teams. But the most, like you say, cherry-picked image may be right. The biggest one that stood out was the Mouz Outsiders game, because there was that shot of them walking in and nobody, right? So, I do kind of get it. But yeah, I think there's a bit on... the fans and the passion. There's a bit on Gaules for kind of, maybe adding fuel to that fire, that it's like, we are here as Brazilians, not necessarily supporters of Counter-Strike. But there is also, I think, a little bit of onus on the makeup of the event, that it's like, maybe you couldn't catch everything if you wanted to. Maybe there were more incentives to not be in person and watch the game, because you can still catch it. This is the world in which we live, where it's like, the TVs are on, you can get it on your phone, you can follow the game while
there's
also
a giant
not being
stadium or not stadium, but there's a giant screen where you can watch it outside too. And like the biggest issue is that there were tickets for the arena doubled as tickets for the fan fest.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
if you
buy
buy
that's
a
very
ticket
true,
for the
actually.
fan fest, then maybe you leave
It should
the
be at
ticket
like a
for the
discounted
arena.
price or whatever. Yeah.
I don't know how it would work, but if the idea is that like the arena and the fan fest can coexist at the same time during the games, and I can watch from the outside, I probably shouldn't also be able to watch inside too, because I'm taking a ticket away from somebody who's only going to watch inside.
That is very true, actually.
You know what I mean? So like, I don't know how you would do that, because I understand the freedom angle of like, wouldn't it be so cool if I had a ticket to the fan fest and I could also go into the arena when I wanted to?
We'll just get it for different days though. As well,
sure.
Like you can sort.
Well, that's the other thing.
Like,
I think most of the tickets were like multi-day stuff, right? Or something like
so
that
there's
too.
that is fully, totally over our heads. A logistic issue, but I think it does exist. That
it could be resolved.
we can't run it again like this, because otherwise,
they definitely underestimated the pull of a fan fest.
Sure.
It was way too much. But I don't think that's something that you can sort of knock the event for, in terms of having alternative activities to do, because that's almost like every convention or sort of gaming event, is that there are other things to do, and the way you beat the line is by doing it when there's an event happening, or like a big thing that will pull the crowd in, so you can go and buy your shirts or whatever, or get them signed. I don't think that's really as much a logistical issue. I think a lot of the sort of crowd issues actually just have to do with location, because you have to think about how many fans are sort of based in the European areas. Like most of the European majors end up getting filled, and they get filled by people from all walks of life with different fandoms kind of contributing to that. I think Rio might have just been too far away for a lot of those guys to travel out to Brazil. So you ended up, the last time the last couple of times we've been to Brazil, the crowd has been dominated probably like 95-98% by Brazilian fans. It makes sense why there is an underrepresentation of people cheering for the other team or not hyping up the plays. It's because we have a sort of intentionally, or I guess region-locked bias crowd to the Brazilian squads, which is, I think that's fine. I think they can be like that. But that is, I think, one of the major contributing reasons as to why we didn't have people still hyping up, some of the sick clutches that maybe a heroic would pull off, or somebody that was competing against the Brazilian squads wasn't going, oh my god, I can't believe that's happened, is because there weren't people from those fandoms at this event, just because it would have been probably too inconvenient when most of the majors are in Europe.
Not too many people actually wanted to come to Brazil, is what you're saying, Yumi. Yeah. So. What I will
Maybe.
say is, this is going to sound weird because we did have teams getting spat on and intimidated by fans. But for the most part, actually, this event didn't have any crimes against players.
Yeah, sure.
As far as I'm aware, like, we didn't actually, besides the spitting, we didn't have an assault, to my knowledge. And, like, we didn't have any injuries. We didn't have any incidents like that. There's obviously the Saticus thing, but that's not really related. Like, what I mean is, there weren't, like, Brazilian individuals in the crowd who were rabble-rousing and doing something that was actually criminal and actually could endanger the life of somebody beyond the stuff that I already mentioned. So, like, that was a personal fear of mine, was like, this could get very out of hand, or you could have somebody who takes the wrong right turn on the way back to the hotel and walks into, some bad neighborhood they don't want to be in or whatever. That was a realistic potential. And so I'm glad that wasn't happening. And you do, unfortunately, like, paradoxically, I wouldn't give points for ESL for this because, like, on the one hand, they probably helped make sure that didn't happen. On the other hand, they held the fucking event in Rio, so I don't know why.
Yeah, right.
Like, you can't really say, "Oh, great job, ESL! You've kept the players safe from the country that you decided to put the
Yeah,
major in."
I bet though.
But
I bet going into like the 2020 Rio major that was supposed to happen, I bet they'd been working on that for a while to get all these things right. And now all of a sudden we've got an IEM Rio every year. That doesn't just happen.
I don't know about that
doesn't.
one.
But that doesn't just happen because the major was successful or whatever. Like, this is definitely something that they've had planned for a while, and would also be, into what Yumi's saying, where we are very Eurocentric. Even more so, like, NA's got the fan base. NA's got, they'd fill out and they'd be less biased because there's only one good NA team. So
they want one in every. They'll want one in every single part of the world. Like, I
Yeah.
would be surprised they had, like, the
Well, they were meant to do
question mark. They will have probably one in either China or in Australia, something within like the Southeast Asia region.
Yeah.
So that people can watch from that region and probably dominate the fan base.
they were meant to do a China next month,
Yeah.
right? But it got cancelled.
Like Beijing or something, right?
Yeah. But it's been cancelled for whatever reason. I've not looked into it.
Not for
deeply.
whatever reason, Skriv.
I see. Okay.
For the same reason why many people are trapped in their houses.
Right.
That's all.
Okay. Well, yeah. Fair enough.
Zero COVID, by the way.
Yeah. But all the same, I think that for me, I won't lie. I think that this was a bit more of an interesting major than Antwerp. And I think that, well, I mean, look.
I guess it depends on how you define interesting. Like, Antwerp was significantly more satisfying. Sure.
But you kind of have, as well, the storyline going into that major was it's FaZe or Na'Vi. And that's all it was for most of the tournament. So, I think there's always going to be something where it's like, and now we have a tournament where it's all mixed up and it's all wide open. It's like the other end of the spectrum. And people are like, wow, this is kind of shit. But then it's also like, you may as well have not really watched the last major until the Legend stage. Because it pretty much, apart from a BNE over performance there, it pretty much went the way that you would expect. You look at a matchup, who should win it? A team won it. There's a few games in there that are a little close, a little crossover, might be, it's not an upset potential game. Yeah, they're genuinely close in the rankings and all this kind of stuff. So I think that, the recency bias and the recency, like, negativity really, really does play in. And we expect so much out of these events as well, which I think is, why they're held in such a high regard and why, but broadcast quality wise, all that, it was totally smooth. Yeah, there's little things, and these are things that I might change because I'm involved, and I'd like to also in future get into a position where I can actually actively change these things. But the average viewer is probably not going to be too bothered. They just want to hear from James. They're not too bothered that Shocks might have had to wrestle through a couple people to get to him. That looks a little bit awkward on camera. But in reality, they just want to hear from James or whatever, So I think that I'd say it was a pretty good major. I think definitely not up there, not a legendary one. We didn't get all the storylines marry up. We did have a few issues crowd wise, whether that is whatever reasons. We're just throwing a load of them in there. But I don't know. It felt like, honestly though, man, like that Fury and RV game is probably one of the more exciting games that I've watched. If, again, you can remove yourself, forget about the, and there are some things that we can't forget about. I absolutely cannot condone spitting on Simple as he leaves after he's already lost. Do you know what I mean?
It was also between map 1 and map 2. Like they completed a comeback or whatever, or stopped a Furia comeback.
That's just like inhumane, bro. Like why?
Yeah, but there are crazy people everywhere. You know, like
I guess that's.
I don't know, man. I haven't heard of spitting at a CS:GO event.
Yeah, but it's like how
Space Soldiers in Brazil, by the way.
But where do you want to remove it?
Two for 4 or whatever.
It's not a tough line, right? There is a physical aspect to that. There is a physical aspect to that, which is something that we step over. We talked about in the last episode a little bit about the verbal stuff. You know what I mean? Because it's like
where they were chanting, And
but like
Chance trying to play devil's advocate,
right. And I think he makes a fairly good point though, because chance that we have, I've been to a few games in the UK, and my guy, who on the opposition or whatever. Their best player, one of the best players in the league, he took a corner and it was like close to the home end or whatever, and everyone just starts pointing at him and shouting pedo. Do you know what I mean? Like come on, that's like
evidence.
but that's like psychological warfare or whatever, which is like, so where I think that yes, I am again going to make it clear that going physical and is over the line.
It's over a line, agree.
But
I think there's equally chances that this has happened to other players in the past before that just doesn't make it to Twitter or the general public's information. Like, I don't think this is something that has only ever happened in Brazil. It's probably happened at other events where people have gone into like rowdy bouts with a random fan from the other team or some BS like that. Like, there are people that are just going to be stupid, and I think we have to kind of come to accept that is something that you might have to deal with, unless we want to have all the players barred by security guards and, ushered into back rooms and only go into like specific VIP experiences and all that, which is something that we might even end up seeing in our lifetimes, because esports will take the sports route to a certain degree at some point. So it's like, I don't think it's something to sort of narrow in specifically on this. It's like one guy that was decided to be a dick that he's made news, So just let that guy continue to be a dick in his own isolation.
We're not confirming exactly how many people were. I mean, there were reports of multiple fans needing to be restrained as Navi was walking out. So who knows, really, how widespread it was. But you're right, Yumi. I mean, obviously, I think it was Fur's brother, happened to be Brazilian, of course. But, he was threatening, and I think it was a North player back some years ago and physically being abused. Oh, and then there was KNG, who obviously said, prove it or I'll kill you, and tried to hunt down FNS at an after party. Happens to be Brazilian, but that's, don't zero in on it. It doesn't represent them. It just happens to be them,
There's definitely a bit of a culture wash, I think.
To be fair, like, I'm being glib about it, but there is this is a very different culture than what like the average Eurocentric individual is going to be aware of, right? And so there's inevitable culture clash that comes of it.
Right.
I just find it like I'm digging up all of the events and cherry picking, right? But it's like I'm doing that mostly for banter. There is a genuine thing where they are going to have a come to Jesus moment or whatever the fuck you want to call it, where they figure out how to be a more normal people. I mean, come to Jesus is funnier because they're very religious down there, so they should actually know by now. But like, they are going to need to figure out how to, like, if they want the Western influences of the tourism and the money and all this other stuff, then there's going to have to be some sort of unification of cultural ideals. There's going to have to be that. And, ideally it would involve not spitting on players, right? And not doing anything like that. I also think, like, there's still the question about crowd cheating. That seems to still be a split topic for a lot of people, because on the one hand, a crowd getting hyped up because a flank is coming happens all over the place, right? And also, there has been crowd cheating in the past. We think about Astralis in Denmark, right? So it's not like it's the only time this has ever happened in history either. But there is a genuine thing you have to keep in mind. Like, this really was mostly like, there was a very clear signal bias where they were cheering for or making noise to announce a flank against a Brazilian team and not for a Brazilian team, right?
Or if a Brazilian player was like hunting for somebody in a 1v1, they'd start cheering if they put their crosshair in the right spot. They'd be like, "Hey, you did it! You found him without seeing him."
Oh wow,
yeah.
And I don't think we fixed that with booths, by the way. I know everybody wants to talk about soundproof booths. Maybe we do, but I feel like it's like vibrations. I don't know how you
so much.
I know players really don't like playing in them as well. They're a bit claustrophobic.
Well, yeah, there's that, right? And like, I actually like the idea. One of the things I really like about Counter-Strike events at this level is that when you actually do like the setup on the stage in the arena was actually really exciting for me in this event. The fact that you've got the players and it's like open air and they sit down and like this is massive stadium and they seem like so small on it, but then you get obviously the camera angles to make them bigger on the screens and they become larger than life. I think that all works really well. And in theory, if they're, if they can play to the crowd, if they're like a simple or obviously like Furia, if they're like Cadian in some of his amounts, right, where he pulls off the crazy clutch and then he like took his headset off and started like stomping around like going crazy and stuff like that's a memorable moment from this major that I think everybody will look fondly on. And like his hand is like trembling as he's trying to plug his headset back in and all this other stuff, right? And it's like these are really cool moments. Like these are things that you remember, that you take away, that you might not even remember what event it was, but you know it happened and it was meaningful and it was good. And that's the kind of stuff that you don't get with nearly as much if you do go for booths anyway. So even if you were able to somehow fix that thing, I don't even know if it's actually a genuine improvement for the viewer experience. It might be, you could argue it's good for the integrity of the game, but it depends. Like really, I think if the tough part is we were talking about the format earlier and how like you kind of have to have a format that will give you consistent excellence. And this is where I'm torn on it, because it would probably give you consistent excellence if there was less of an influence on the players when there was crowd involved, right? I mean, we think back to the online era. I mean, that's not LAN, but like besides the changes to how networking works with CS, like there's no crowd, there's not nearly as much pressure, and people can play perfect Counter-Strike. So it really depends on what you decide you're testing for. And I do feel like if we completely eliminate the crowd, it's not really going to be an improvement, even though it might improve the quality of the game that's being played on your screen.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm just kind of I wasn't listening too intently to the cast, as it were, because we were doing this watch party thing. But I don't know that there was as much cheating in the Fury and RV game. I could be wrong. Maybe you guys. I think you were in.
Maybe they killed the X-ray for that game.
Possible. We don't know that, but I'm ever the optimist. Like, they did it in the early stage as a deterrent. Then there was all this. That's obviously where it changes, isn't it, as well? When to sort of pick up on what you're saying, Pronogo, like these things change, they remove, and then suddenly it becomes an attack. I think that's sort of the difference. Where it's like if the Danish crowd lost their X-ray, they'd be like, "Well, yeah, fair, we were cheating." Maybe not fully, blazingly admitting it like that, but in the sense of like, okay, makes sense, right? Whereas I think that it becomes, because for me, it's like you abuse the privilege, you lose it. The stage on this whole, like, if you're going to spit on players, you won't get your player walkouts at IEM Rio 2023. And you won't get them, leaving with heads hung. They'll be either some kind of tunnel way, that's maybe a bit much, or maybe just the fact that it's like you get them out early, or whatever. And then it's like, it's just kind of boring. The players are just sat there already.
But I mean, you still have incidents like that still happening in like the NBA or not the NHL so much, but like when they
fans
do their
get thrown out
walkouts,
for that, right?
yeah, they do. They get thrown out, and that's the way that you have to basically combat it to a certain degree. It's like anybody that acts up, you throw them out, and I'm sure that's the stance that ESL took at this event.
Lifetime ban,
Yeah, I'm just curious where this shift into being more crowd cheating at LAN events has kind of come from. Is it because of the online era where when you were sat at home and you were watching your favorite team play, you could yell at your screen all you want? Now we're just doing it at fucking every event. Like, I hated that it was at Copenhagen. I hated that it happened here in Brazil as well. I just don't care about how your team performs. Let them win on their own terms.
Yes.
Like, be pissed that your team is losing these rounds, but actually have a reaction instead of just going like, I guess we lost that 1v3, huh? It's a shame.
Well, that is more like you're sat at home like, oh, I guess they didn't win.
Yeah, it's like what the fuck is this? Like, I don't remember in previous majors having watched and seeing like, oh, the crowd is very visibly cheating here. But like, since events have come back out of COVID, now we're having to worry about this as like a newfounded issue. Like, have we just lost our ethical standpoint, like a competitive integrity over the online era? Have we just implemented new fans that have no basis of morality? It's so odd to me that this is even an issue that we have to talk about. Like,
I mean, a little bit, but it trickles down. The players cheated.
Coaches,
Like,
cheated?
do you know what I mean? The coaches is the big one, but like we have
Are you
so
talking
many
about like
of,
players like specifically mousing over?
well, no,
like,
no,
with
no,
Civic State
no,
or
no, no,
what?
no,
What do you
no.
mean?
I do mean like from an extent of but if we're to really, that's clickbait, isn't it? Really, what I've just said. But is the coaches cheated? Then we had a little bit of vitality with the screens and all that shit.
Yeah.
And then heroic in any other sport, in any other sport, that team would probably be forced to sell its team at the very least. Yeah, the fact that it's like how can the organization not know that this is maybe gone? That's like malpractice,
even if they don't know,
or whatever.
yeah, it's like
They should. Yeah,
they should.
They should have a close enough, or especially again in the online era. You've got no excuse. There should be some motherfucker behind them watching, making sure that they don't do anything that could compromise the integrity of your organization that you've spent years building up. And those players were in the grand final. Some of them, not all. Nico knew more or whatever, but like poor guy. So all that kind of stuff. Like, I think a little bit, yeah, especially because the coach Isik, and all this. If you're in the arena, that's a bit of a different one. I don't know, because this whole nationality angle comes in. But let's say if you're in the arena, you probably are a bit more, or at the very least, the people starting those things as well. Yeah, this is some, again, that we've been over, but you're probably a more hardcore fan. So it does kind of, and you also like idolize these players as well. So you have all that, and then you have that it's like, well, their opponents have probably cheated. Now you can say, right? So Na'Vi would be the one against Furia. I don't think that anyone on the Na'Vi team was really involved in what's happened as far as we know. Where's the report at, Isik? But I think that they can now just sort of tacitly assume that, yeah, Blade was probably involved somewhere, but he's just too big of a name to get called out on it, or something like that. So I think that's maybe me psychoanalyzing, the Brazilian crowd a little bit too much, or crowds in general.
I think a lot of them probably don't even know CS is the other problem. Like,
yeah, well, I think,
this particular event, if you're in this event, you might have just been there's this,
the people starting it, though, the people that begin the idea of, he's got his crosshair, over the spot, and then go, whoa, and then everyone's like, I get it. They're trying to give it,
sure.
You can clock onto that pretty quickly even if you are just a casual fan.
It was odd as well, though. Like the guy who designed all the marketing material within the Rio space. Like the posters, designing trains and stuff to say there was a major happening. I remember he posted like the whole marketing campaign, and I remember I actually asked him. I was like, why do like none of these posters actually mention what game this is? And it's because from a marketing point of view, they wanted it to just be like, this is a big esports event that's happening in Rio, and go support the Brazilian teams. Like, that is basically what the marketing seemed to imply. There were almost exclusively Brazilian players on all the marketing material. It was never a mention of what game it was. So yeah, I think it's a very realistic angle that there could be a large portion of the crowd that were marketed to just be there for Brazil in the first place, instead of being there for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I think the only advert that actually had any inclusion of what game this even was on the train, where you've got like a lot of real estate. The rest were just like posters of esports Rio. That's it.
Yeah, or obviously posters of Imperial members, right?
Exactly.
It was Imperial, Furia. I mean,
those fit into celebrity status almost,
Precisely.
So
and it's like that's a very reasonable way to market the tournament, but also that also probably leads into some of the favoritism, or I guess inherent bias. So
yeah, and I mean,
which makes it more easy or likely that cheating is going to occur, right?
Sure, and it's like
bad acting.
How far? Do you know what I mean? If we keep adding loads and loads of layers of obscurity or whatever, it's like it's also the nature of the game makes it easier to cheat. Like, if it was easy to cheat in basketball or in American football, there are fucking fans out there that would do it week in, week out and they'd be like, this isn't a prop, this is my team. I ride or die for my team. So, so there is also that it's like, it's way easier for people that, want to kind of throw these ideas and throw these, cheats. And again, it's like, okay, we can deal with signs, that was a thing or whatever for a day. we can kind of get rid of that. But the whole cheering aspect, it's tough as well to fully shut that down. Yeah, I don't know. And ultimately, it's like you're only making a fool of yourself, and you're only delegitimizing the play that could occur, that could even win a game, you know, in some. So the rest of the community is going to look on you as kind of being a little bit silly, or kind of being like, yeah, sure, Imperial didn't get knocked out or whatever. Yeah, they did make Legend stage, or it would have been chat. I don't know anymore. You know, like it is so I've just started calling them first and second and then playoffs,
Sure.
you know. So yeah, oh sure, they qualify or whatever, but it doesn't really count. You know, so I don't think that you understand that as a fan, even all this fucking consequence domino effect where it's like, you know, and then maybe you get Fallen coming forward being like, yeah, we made it, but it feels a bit sour because I only knew where that guy was in the 1v1 16-13 finish because I heard everyone cheering when I put my cross. So I feel dirty to have made,
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
and then you've like flipped it upside. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think that it's uncool, and if we can stop doing it, that'd be great. But at the same time, you know, players would cheat if they could. Players have cheated, you know, and coaches have cheated, and blah blah blah.
Esports is also just like mega vulnerable to it. Like if you go to a football game, you're not gonna be like, oh, go long.
Yeah.
That's the, like,
And also-
there's no way that you can make that happen. you
Yeah,
know?
and again, it speaks into, it's just easier. It's just easier because of the way that the game is out, especially for CS as well over a League or a Dota. So there is that. And then there's also the fact that, yeah, you know, a big sports thing, you got 40 to 80,000, maybe more if you're at one of the biggest in the world. That is just a wave of sound. I think you can still just about make it out. And you also have there, it's like, again, it's like, if we had, you know, an arena that we could fill with like 60,000 seats or whatever, or 40,000, you know, some of those stadiums that came forward, that would be filled with a portion of Brazilian fans, and then you've got, you know, FaZe
Have, like,
fans, and
an
then you've
away
got
arena,
the
right? Or,
rest.
like, an
Yeah,
away section.
exactly, right? All that kind of stuff. So I think that's also to be considered. Yeah, but it just feels, again, because we're kind of infantile and because it is an arena, but it's on a smaller level and all this, that it feels like it's a really big problem.
Yeah. Maybe it is something, that we might have to like restructure the way we think about ticketing, which we know we're gonna start thinking about now as we have Ticketmaster now on board with ESL. So,
Indeed, maybe.
Yeah, so.
I think they know. I think they know that they can improve these things, and that's sort of the key thing. At the end of the day.
Well,
So.
If you're looking for improvements, don't know that Ticketmaster is the one. But who knows?
Well, yes, that is unfortunate
Yeah.
timing.
There's a lot of drama surrounding them at the minute.
Yes,
anyway,
yeah.
So yeah.
But they'd already
great timing.
signed. They'd already signed that dotted line. And this is you know, karma for when they did GG for all and then got their announcements lined up. They've now had it flipped and had, you know, their announcements out of whack. So, you know, it happens, I suppose.
Just waiting for the FTX partnership, obviously.
yeah.
Like,
the 24-hour, you know, we are happy or we are unhappy we've signed with FTX. We have to make this for legal reasons. And then 24 hours later, obviously, we've dropped FTX. Unlucky guys.
Classic.
You know,
Unlucky.
you got to feel a little bit bad for TSM because there is kind of that, you know, 210 million over 5 years or whatever it was.
I'm not sure I have to feel bad for anybody trying to grab crypto money just because it seems like such a hairy investment if you don't really thoroughly vet everybody involved, and it doesn't seem like TSM really strike me as the type of people.
Yeah,
who
but
thoroughly
like
vet
if I said to you, you're no longer Pronogo, yeah, you're gonna be Pronogiv, but I'll give you $20 million, you know, over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
You'd probably go, do you know what? I don't fucking give a shit where the money comes from, really. Like, obviously, you'd probably care a little bit. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Sure.
you know, if I said it's fairly legit, I just sell crappy cars or whatever that sometimes might not work. You know,
Or I'm a bank.
yeah, true.
You know,
That
like,
is true. Actually, that is true.
FTX is technically like a
Yeah.
bank. Like they just hold on to funds.
To
right?
be fair,
Yeah.
Skriv, if you had bank in your name, I might be more likely to trust you for money.
Skriv Bank.
so.
Yeah, well, there you go. I look like
true.
a certain bank in the scene, I suppose. So you know, there is that. But yeah,
Yeah,
as in,
okay.
come on,
Yeah.
James See, I told you earlier, my friend told me I should make a channel where I describe jokes. And I've just done it there, haven't I?
I will say, if you were talking about improvement, we're looking for improvement.
Yes,
Hopefully ESL improves. All true. Not sure that Valve is going to improve. Not sure that these changes that Valve made to the game are a step in the right direction. But hey, I talk about game balance all the time, and Skriv's the host. So Yumi, what do you think about these changes?
Sound.
A1S honestly can get fucked. Don't really care that much.
Yeah, but
about
does that
it.
change even matter?
Not really, because
Yeah.
the cost is the main thing. Like I remember I was playing a game the other day, and I was just like, yeah, I'll go to the A4 and win pistol round, and second round I cannot buy my armor in M4, and I was like, well, I've fallen into the good old trap. I was 100 short, so let's yeah, I don't think it changes that much. It will certainly change the way that people think about like long distance maps, like maybe Overpass or I guess
Not Dust 2 anymore.
Well,
yeah, not Dust 2.
It seems like
yeah,
it was. I thought that was really funny that it's like we've had a range change and also getting rid of the longest range area in the game.
Yeah,
Love
the
that.
too long, like B plat to
Well,
B
yeah,
tunnels,
yeah,
A long
true,
to
yeah.
A site, like, yep. So like Mirage, Overpass, we'll probably see those maps move to A4. I think people were playing A4 on certain teams anyway. Like I think Navi were most famously like playing a lot of people on A4 on Overpass because of like the close corners that you can sit in where your barrel doesn't show. So yeah, that should be an easy adoption. AWP, I don't hate it. I honestly think that it's maybe it's the wrong way to target the issue of like overutilization of spamming smokes, or I guess people just firing off haphazardly. There was, maybe you make a change to the reserve ammo instead. But I don't think it changes that much. You just have to be a little bit more thoughtful as an AWPer. If you're going for a retake and you only have 3 bullets left, you probably want to reload. You miss one shot, you're just going to be like, dang it. I only have 3 more. I'm out of my bullets, and you're reloading out in the open, which is like a long thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters that much. And we'll talk about the map afterwards, Get your thoughts on the guns first.
Yeah, I think the M4 change, it's funny, isn't it? It's so weird to me. Because the M4 change is incredibly subtle, right? And it's like, okay, we're trying to work on this. We brought the ammo down a bit. Didn't quite fix it. Still pretty dominant, in terms of where the MM rankings and in terms of where the major looked. That's always a good barometer for them, how's the major looking? Very subtle. Let's just tweak it down a little bit. It's gone from, 4 shots at long range in the body to 5, right? That's how we like to keep it. Still rewarded for your headshots in the same sort of way. Very cool. And then, it's like fucking good cop, bad cop or whatever. Then in comes the AWP change that just feels so out of left field and, like you're saying, Yumi, a little bit the right problem but the wrong way or whatever. And yeah, it just feels like it is in terms of numbers, you've halved the number there, right? And there's loads. There's your haphazard kind of spamming, but also I think you can't really play as aggressive anymore, because you might get caught these moments of not really thinking about where your ammo's at and like, I can keep re-peeking this. I'm playing cube or dice, whatever, on Overpass. I can keep peeking around this corner. I'm not going to run out of ammo, and I can just keep ringing off shots. And now it's like, if you miss one of those, you are mega vulnerable. You are mega, mega vulnerable. Before it's like, you could drop back and then, quick spin around and you're back on a, nice angle. You might not even have to spin around, whatever. Now it's like you got to add a reload into there. And I think that, on the top level, that is really going to add, a layer of nuance, actually, that, your AWPer in some rounds is going to have to be careful. And you have to really calculate if you want to get aggressive, cool. But you are probably more likely to get traded or die because you're going to end up running out of ammo trying to get away, right? So things like that. I think it's relatively cool, but at the same time, I think it's maybe a bit too harsh. I think it could have quite an impact. But again, this just kind of comes from the idea that we've always talked about, where Valve have a vision, whether it comes to how they want to utilize coaches, comes to what weapons they want to be strong, and they do have a bit of a vision. And I think in the past, they have thrown into this idea of A, being a little bit slow, and B, maybe just fucking throwing dart at the wall and being like, okie dokie, T-side meta, or whatever, or, we want the A1S to be the prominent gun now, or, Kenny S is good at the game, let's nerf the AWP, or whatever, right?
He's coming back. Oh, no, he's not.
Yeah. But indeed, I think it's like, yeah, just one of those things where at the top level, it will have that nuance. It will be cool. It might gut it in a certain sense. It might gut certain players, unfortunately, that, you know, just can't play as Aggie or whatever. But they're looking at this from a little bit more of an MM perspective. Is that I usually think it's like a 75-25 MM top level, right? And I think, yeah, your MM players are really going to feel it because obviously there's just a bit of fuckery that goes into spamming walls and shit like this.
Yeah, well, sorry, I'll get your thoughts in a second, Prodogo. I just want to add in just very quickly. It's also just going to make movement actually more important, which I fucking love. You jiggle peek and angle with an AWPer holding onto it, he misses that shot. Yeah, you are putting him in a potentially vulnerable position where he is more tradable than he ever was before because he never run out of ammo. Like in a situation where his bomb site is getting attacked, that actually has some implications, but like potentially to holding onto bomb sites.
I honestly think the A1S change is like the stupidest part of this update, and the reason being is that it probably is not going to usurp the throne and allow the A4 to come back. It also is just weird. Like, when you look at the design of the A1S, it has lower recoil than the A4, and so you would think it's perfect for the high accuracy, lower fire rate gun to have higher damage at range, not lower damage at range. The A4 has a higher fire rate and worse recoil. So why would that be the one that deals less damage? You know what I mean? Like, the A1S is the longer gun where you will be spotted from more angles because of the barrel, but it deals more damage up close than the A4. Like, they basically just got their whole design of what the guns are meant to be as tools, like, completely backwards with this update. It just doesn't make sense. It's like you said they have a vision. What the fuck is it? Are they looking through a kaleidoscope, bro? Or they popped too many magic mushrooms over in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Like, what are you doing?
I have a little bit of a take here that I've just kind of thought of. It's not mental, but I think in terms of discovering what that vision is a little bit, right?
Sure, yeah.
A lot of the guns
that
they've
DMT.
Yeah. a lot of the guns in the past that they've had to work around you know, nerfing and everything. They all have competition, right? Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. So pistols, for example, I think are in a pretty good spot right now. Yeah, the 5.7 maybe needs some work, sure, because it's like, oh, up close, you know, it can be really deadly and all this. And do we just do away with single bullet kills on those weapons? Maybe, right? But in terms of the, you know, the MO of that gun, like the usefulness of those guns, I think they're in a good. Julies are useful in the pistol round and only really super up close. P250 is pretty good on an eco round and is a bit of an all-rounder. The Deagle is good at range, and since nerfing that, it's not as good up close. It still, you know, should be decent as compared to the rest of the field because it's the most expensive pistol. And then the 5.7 is good close to mid, maybe at a push, right? But it's obviously... So there's enough, and, you know, the Tech 9 is a bit of a different beast on, you know, that's kind of good at range, but not as spammy, so it's... You know, you have to be a bit more calculated using it, whereas before you could just run and gun like it was an SMG for $500, right? So I think that they've sort of worked that out, that each gun has a little bit of a category that it fits into. And I think that maybe with the M4s, they're trying to bring them both close to the same sort of area. So that it's like, okay, I can use an A1S because I am the B anchor and I'm going to do a lot of smoke spamming or whatever, right? Which is already what we've set up, that it's this idea, you know, maybe the M4 you'll see it, as you said, Michael, you'll see it a bit more on Overpass or whatever. So I think that they're maybe with those two guns trying to make them both usable. One of the big things that they should add that continues to come up is you should be able to change them in game and swap them about, right? Maybe there's a bit of a cooldown on that you can't do it every round. You do it 1 in 3 rounds, whatever. But I think that would be a nice nuance to add and might get teams experimenting with it because it's like, oh, we've got loads of money. We're really winning this game. Let me use the A4 because I feel like, you know, why not? What you got to lose, right? We can afford to lose a round. It's 12-4 or whatever.
Make it cost extra money to switch even.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah,
take $500 out of my back pocket just so I can pick up the A1S. You know?
And you can figure it out. And I think that also would breed innovation rather than being like, A1S is best, I'm only going to use that because it's the only gun that I can kind of select. If you can use a bit of both, there might be scope for experimentation. And actually, well, A4 on these particular angles is pretty effective. Now, to kind of bring it back, I think that the AWP doesn't have any competition. So maybe they feel like they need to be more heavy-handed with changing the AWP. And, you know, we never really know what kind of effect it's going to have. But yeah, maybe they feel like they need to make these seemingly more drastic changes because the AWP, A, doesn't have any competition, like I've said, and B, is also the most impactful gun in the game. So, you know, you kind of have to, or role in the game, I guess you could say. The gun still might be A1S, depending on how you want to look at it, right? So yeah, I think that, you know, we've got some weapons, some classes have all this competition going on, all these different use cases, but the AWP is the AWP. Like, the Scout isn't competition with the AWP, let's be real, and it functions as a very different weapon. But yeah, so
the auto snipers don't one-hit kills, so you can't really say them either, right?
Yeah. And they're just way too expensive for that fact. So yeah, I think that's maybe an interesting sort of angle, trying to discover in the mind of, you know, because we've obviously got people come out and say, oh, well, they only balance based according to Clearly, the meme is clearly the devs at Valve are shit at the game and all this kind of stuff, you know.
Well, they don't have to be good. They just need to know what the fuck's going on in the game.
Yeah,
like, the biggest issues, if you really observe it, are smoke spams and wall bangs. Okay, maybe you try to adjust one of them because the op nerf means you're going to be less likely to spam walls. It's something I said myself many times is if you actually do make it 5 instead of 10, and, you know, other people were less extreme than me. They wanted 7, 8, whatever. If you cut down on the ammo and the clip, then obviously you don't have the ability to just keep spamming walls and then still have full shots to, you know, ace if you hit the shots afterwards, right? And so that, I think, is a positive change in that sense where you're cutting down on the spamming. But with the A1S nerf being so specific and so bizarre and also not really even contributing to most maps or most positions on most maps, yeah, what is the point? Like, you're still going to smoke spam. You're not going to change that at all. Like, I think this is not the end of the CT dominant meta. And, you know, I didn't really talk about this earlier, but like when I called Rio the tournament of shit T-sides, it was because you would go like, you know, 12-3 or 13-2, and you would still have a chance on CT side when you go to the next half. It's just like, that is not entertaining or interesting whatsoever. You can't build the narrative. You can't talk about how like this really matters. The only thing you can say is, oh, they actually got 5 T rounds. Shocker. Insane. Like, these guys will probably win this game actually. And that's just really counterintuitive for the average person who doesn't know that. And also it's just awkward for the commentators trying to tell a story. It's really bad for everything. And so not fixing that part, which is, I don't think this is going to fix that part. Like, really, I'm not even really sure what you do. Like, actually, the map pool change is more interesting than any of these in terms of like how impactful I think they will be. I guess the op is pretty impactful too, but mostly like you're going to see less op spam in particular. You might use it as a bait. I saw people saying you can now throw a decoy and make it seem like you're shooting op shots. People were already doing that on Dust 2, funnily enough. So I guess maybe the decoy will live on at the professional meta. If that ends up happening, that could be interesting. Make it harder for you to count the shots. And so who knows what's really going to happen? That's pretty much the only thing I can see from these changes.
You know,
it's kind of interesting, you know.
It's like when they did the nade update or whatever, there were obviously pro players who outcried that this will break the game and ruin the game, and it changed Inferno a fair bit. Maybe we're seeing in time it could still do so. It changed Dust 2 a lot, but it's not had this like terrible effect or whatever. It just kind of means that, you know, if there's a spot where a smoke can be rotated, it's a little bit easier to do that, you know. And then hate cheese is the big one, but
yeah, well, I'm just gonna throw this in as like my personal belief. We should have just changed the stats on the A1S and the A4 long ago. Like, keep the prices the same. A1S can be cheaper, but it takes 5 bullets, has 30 5 bullets to kill, but has 30 bullets in each magazine. Make the A4 more expensive, but can 4-bullet kill and shoot slower. Like, take literally every statistic, or for reload times, draw animations, whatever. Just swap the numbers around. You probably would have been fine, in my opinion. But
yeah, well, the cheaper gun did better damage, right?
Yeah,
and that was just
and
really
had
stupid.
the tracer's advantage, and like there were too many positives for it. It costs less. It's just so silly. Like, it doesn't make any sense from that perspective. Also, if they are going to balance more guns, where's my M249 at? Like, why is it so expensive, and why is it so shit? So, if we're just thinking about balancing here, they've made a lot of guns viable. All the shotguns are theoretically viable. All the SMGs are theoretically viable. I mean, there's obviously some that are stronger than others. But the M249 gets zero love, and I'm not here for it.
Where's my revolver
Fair.
valve?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah, I mean, there are a few just totally redundant weapons. The Negev also falls into that, but it's only 1700.
I'm still waiting for the Negev to actually be bought in pro play. There was some weird commentary, like I think this was during the online era, where somebody said it's like banned or something. Like I don't remember what this was. There's some professional. I think it might have been Rops or something.
Who knows?
Somebody
bro?
was asking.
Maybe it's
is
actually
the Negev still banned in pro play or something like question mark? And I don't know. He could have just been.
No, I think that was
but...
true. Yeah. It's because it was so cheap and it could laser beam and Valve were obviously making changes to it. I think they just all sportsmen agree.
Oh, well, it's
see.
it's maybe close. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That there's maybe a little bit of a hidden OP there in the sense that it's like you could probably, to be fair, you could probably make use of 150 bullets holding a line.
Yeah.
Bit of RNG involved in peeking and trying to kill that guy, even if you are sick, because the other guy is also sick. So it's like you probably won't get any kills because people aren't going to peek you. But you can hold off an area for like 30 seconds in one, like 20 seconds maybe in one clip. And that maybe does have an effect that is like, yo, let's buy a Negev for 1700. Drop it CT on Inferno on B Inferno, and then you've got 35 seconds left. I'm gonna rotate in my I'm gonna rotate in my smoke on the choke. I'm gonna pick up my Negev from CT spawn, and I'm just gonna spam that thing.
Okay, what I want to see is
you can't peek out and kill that guy that easily.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, yes, you couldn't. Yeah.
So
there's a Tizian moment. I think it was Tizian.
I'm gonna use that actually.
You remember the 90-degree angle headshot? He was apparently practicing. This is big at a major. Like,
He sing barrels over passes, just flick one bullet to the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was practicing allegedly the 90-degree flick. So I want somebody to do that with a Negev, where they start shooting it at the ground, so they don't know where the bullets are coming from, right? And then they just flick it up at some. If you're gonna live in the fantasy land of the Negev.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good strat. Yeah.
I think to be fair, because it's only 1700, there is potential for the Negev to be like a cheese weapon in like a half buy round. You know what I mean? So maybe they do have some kind of a gentleman's agreement that, you don't buy the Negev, because it's just so wildly different from any other gun in the game.
It almost is a Valorant weapon or something.
Yeah. You have to edit the way that you play to such a degree that it's also just like annoying, or whatever, where it's like, I'm sure there's stuff like that in other games where it's like, oh, you don't play full AP Malphite. You guys don't play League really, but it's like every 45 seconds you press the R button, this guy flies in, and if you're a squishy, he's just gonna like one shot you, and it's like you can flash away from it, you can dash it, whatever, but for the most part that's a really annoying thing to deal with. And also, again, at the pro level, dealing with a guy every 45 seconds has his ult, my flash is on like a 5-minute cooldown or whatever it is, So there's probably a few things like that that fit in. Very good game. Well,
listen, when I was still a bit of a noob in that game, when I still played that game, I did get to platinum off of one-tricking AP Alistair top, because I would just WQ them and they would die. So
that's funny. One of my friends is a bit of an Ali cheeser sometimes.
Yeah, alley-oop. Yeah. No, and then, hit Diamond 2 as jungle, and then I was like, oh, I think I can, I learned all these skills, I've put in the time, I grinded, and then obviously Riot just changed the whole thing, and I uninstalled, because why the fuck would I continue dedicating so much time to try to get good at a game if it's just going to keep changing? Which is exactly how Kenny S must feel. Bring it back.
Yes, it is a CS podcast after all. Let's talk about the map. Because we obviously, I think you were on an episode that we touched on this, right, Michael? I think when they brought Tuscan in and stuff. Yeah. So I feel like we've had these conversations as a group before, and I don't hate it. I think Anubis has a few problems, and we're also, this is your area of expertise a little bit, Pronogo, but there's a few bugs still. You know what I mean? There's like this invisible wall It's like the
Talking about
the
nade
clipping,
brush,
the clipping,
yeah.
isn't, or whatever it is.
On B side,
yeah.
where you're trying to throw utility on either side. That wasn't a bug before, and
Okay,
honestly,
well, I
now
don't
that
know
Valve owns the rights and manages the map, I have a feeling that that might have been not an original map maker issue, because
Right.
I don't remember that being an issue. Right, that would have like come up as a very common thing before when it was
Sure.
added. You know,
And
before
what
it
you
was
reckon
active duty.
they've gone over and put the Valve TM, like, you know, brushes everywhere, and they're not quite
I don't know what it
as
was.
sharp or whatever.
Something happened, because Valve obviously now own. So if people don't know, it was made by Rolled, JD40, and Yakuza. Three pretty veteran mappers. They were responsible for a bunch of other maps that made it into the game, but not obviously active duty. They bought the rights to the map, so they now own. Valve now has final say and makes the changes. And that means that these people know. I mean, they might have input. Maybe they can like help out with something. I don't know. But I assume that it's kind of weird, because as the CS:GO maps have gotten more complicated on terms of their artistic direction and how much work has to be done to make this stuff, you kind of need to be the person who made the map, at least artistically, in order to be able to say how you would change something. Like if they ever want to make some structural change to the map, I mean, I don't know if they can actually, match the art style or whatever. I don't know. Like maybe they will be able to, but they're going to be working with the different things. So that's kind of something that's like not really that big of a concern, because, if you like the way Counter-Strike looks, then you don't really care about graphics anyway, right? So it's probably not that big of a concern. The one thing that I do think is the map does look a little bit one note right now. Like it is very much just wherever I see sandstone. Like I see mostly the same colors. There's a little bit of different construction every now and then. People have been talking about the double doors in mid is seeming redundant, and obviously it's super choke pointy. What they don't know is that you can actually boost up from the canal into that little mid area. You can do it, so I'm sure teams will be doing that. So if you're trying to just hold that as a CT, or you've lost control of like the first checkpoint or whatever, they don't necessarily have to come from the upper mid entrance. They can come from that little hole in the wall. Obviously, the rotations on this map are going to be really interesting, and I am also, there's a viewer in the chat saying like they're worried that Valve is going to just edit the map too much or whatever. I am a little bit worried about that, because I don't rate Valve as map designers. Obviously, not a shocker to anybody who's followed the show before. Vertigo's terrible, Ancient's terrible. Get them out of the game. So why I'm not sure. I hope that they are like the changes that I would have more faith basically in the future of Anubis if the original authors were still signed on as like main people who are going to edit the map. Now I'm not sure. Like it could go either way. But I hope that, obviously like this is a nice test case for like a map that is immediately better than other maps that are currently in the pool, like Vertigo and Ancient. I think that is not a controversial statement to make. And I also think that generally, even if they start with a really flawed baseline, they do tend to improve the map. Like obviously Ancient now and Vertigo now do end up playing a bit better than they did before, even if I think it's not enough progress to make it worthwhile. The test case seems to be that maps improve over time, and so I think Anubis will also improve over time. Obviously, like the clip brush bug that Skriv was referencing is like the first thing I would expect to change. Like it's so obvious, it destroys a lot of utility, so definitely needs to be adjusted. And definitely does seem new also. Like I said, I don't think that was originally in the game. Like the map, I played the map when it was added with Tuscan, and I don't recall that happening ever. So yeah, don't know what's going on there. But I am looking forward to hopefully this being like the first of many community maps that get signed on. Because if at the very least, if like I was saying with the maps improving over time or whatever, if we offer up as a community better frameworks for a map, better baseline levels versions of a map, and then Valve iterate on that instead of iterating on their junk that doesn't work fundamentally in the game, like Vertigo, which is just too structurally like vertical, funnily enough, like then yeah, I think we will actually get better results at the end of the day. And so I am very much looking forward to this. It's been a long time coming, and it probably should have been 3 maps instead of 1 changed, but beggars can't be choosers. I'll be grateful for the meal that I got.
I think it's an interesting map for them to pick up, considering they seem to be kind of against going for like spawn-based utility. I think Anubis is a map that you can really utilize spawn-based utility because there's high skyboxes and there's a lot of open area in that regard. I think there's a lot of areas of the map that have just like an artificial ceiling kind of applied to it, kind of similar to Inferno, where you should look like you should be able to jump up here or boost up here, and there's just some ceiling across. So I think from a design perspective, like the actual layout of the map, I don't dislike. but there are a few things I would, why isn't there just a ceiling, like an actual ceiling in an area where you don't want someone to boost or what have you, like that. Those are some of the most enjoyable parts of the game to a certain degree. Like you're bringing over a teammate, you've got an interesting idea. That's why Overpass is developed and sees so much like fanfare to a certain degree, is because you constantly see new stuff or interesting techniques being utilized.
Yes.
But this is a map that seems pretty bland from that regard. Like the only really thing that you can do is go for that boost up into the mid window, like you're kind of talking about, and maybe some interesting spawn smokes that you might be able to throw. I feel like this map is not going to take long to be figured out. Is my issue. I do think it lacks some of the depth that I would maybe hope from a new map, but it's a change of pace. Like I don't hate that from a different angle. Like Dust 2, very played out, least played map at the major, funnily enough, but it's just like if that's what Valve are basing it off of, yeah, this kind of deserved to go through. I'm just a little confused why there was so much fanfare about Tuscan going ahead, and now we've just like, oh, well, you thought we were going to go right, but we went left instead. Community, you don't understand us at all, do you?
Yeah, I mean...
It seems so odd, but yeah, they went from no skybox Tuscan to open skybox Anubis, so, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess. I think Anubis was definitely the better map for me when they released that little update. And I think maybe they knew that as well. Tuscan is a classic or whatever, but... in actuality, the way the game's developed, Molotovs exist, all this, it's like it is a bit of a flawed map, but they also, I guess, wanted to stay as true as they could to the original version of Tuscan. Whereas this did feel like it was maybe the map that could slot in a little bit. Again, if you're a long-time viewer, thanks very much. You probably heard me say this before. I think that, there is a... again, part of this vision or whatever from Valve that they're enjoying adding in these new maps that really do change the game a little bit, you know what I mean? Or at the very least, change the approach as compared to the last map, right? Ancient's got all these cool kind of angles, not many straight-on doors and stuff, and all these different little spots, and it's all green, looks very different. Now we've flipped, and it's all sand, so there is that, and then there's this whole, like, drop down area, and then as you're saying, kind of actually boost back up, and then there's kind of water everywhere. There's a few areas that, might feel like they're a little bit redundant, but it gives a number of different options to get into the same space, right? There's a drop down in CT spawn as well that you can do immediately. One thing I discovered, if Valve are watching, maybe I should make a little video on this and put it on Twitter. There's no invisible walls at the spawns, guys. You can just throw guns out the map. So because my guy Kieran, we'll shout him out one time. He had his gun thrown out the map and he wasn't too happy about that one. By one of our other teammates. So
I mean, you can throw them off of Vertigo as well,
That's true, but that maybe makes a little bit more sense, and maybe you have to do a little bit of movement to do that as well. You can literally just do this off spawn, off the buy round on T side. You just turn around.
Done in T side Inferno.
Yeah. No, there's walls.
The walls. There's invisible walls.
There's invisible walls that stop you doing
it
on Inferno. Yeah.
Yeah.
On the
they can. You can't. It might not be out of the map, but they can be unreachable without maybe a boost or something. So
I'm not sure. Maybe there's a spot or whatever.
Yeah, there are a few. Well, there's also. I mean, you can also just drop it off in the middle of Dust 2 and it fucking descends into the void. So
right.
Like this game's a shame.
I suppose there's a little bit of a little difference. Would you say they're more like bugs? That it's like, oh, there's a spot that's bugged? Because what I'm saying is there's just no attention been paid at all, mate. Just go wild. Just throw it out the back of the map. I don't care. And then in CT spawn, you have to wait for the round to start, but you can do a bit of running and then boop it in the fucking water that's there. So, maybe there's a few things that need changing.
Sure. These are probably things that when you're sitting down to design a map, and these people are experienced, mind you, again. But when you're sitting down to design a map, you're probably not thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna get griefed by my."
Yeah, right. But the thing is, it is something. But again, it's maybe something that Valve, as the implementing this into matchmaking, and having to have a little bit of honesty or whatever, where it's like some people are a bit toxic. They're just gonna fucking you know, it is one thing, like, you know, me and my mates having a laugh, sure, right? And we're not too bothered about playing this new map that I think, played when it came out a couple of times. But if you're solo queue and you're like, yo, I want to be a pretty good player, I want to enjoy this game, and then you just got some fucking knobhead every time you ask for a drop, just throwing your gun out the map and be like, yeah, I dropped you, bro. Go get it, you know? Because there's going to be some guy that does that. But yeah, so there's a few things, but it keeps this argument. I think it keeps going back to like Overpass and everything when they brought this in as a new map and whatnot. It's like, whoa, bro, there's like vertical. One bomb site's up here, the other one's down here, you know. And then Vertigo, they go even more extreme on that. That it's like you can see the verticality, you know, you can shoot with the verticality. You can catch a guy at the top of this big ass ramp. You know, you can throw a smoke from your spawn that goes all the way over the other side of the map. You know, so they've got these kind of, at the very least, I think the MO of the map designers or the maps that they choose or whatever, when it comes in, I think they've gone, right, it needs a quirk, you know, and I think that that's become a bit of a focus when it comes to selecting maps. And yeah, it feels like Anubis is a bit quirky. We've got some tight choke points. We've got this drop down thing that might result in some fucking mental plays. Some teams might not even use it ever because it's just a bit too risky, right? Like to just fly down straight into the crosshair of a CTO. We might, you know, you might do a little right click smoke and drop down with it, catch the guy while he's turning away. You know, whatever. There's a few fresh things. It's like, I have not seen this in a CSGO map before. Whether that is your drop down, whether that is I can go through mid in two ways, or, you know, we always, wherever there's a mid, there's like one way to get there. Yeah, there's nuance, right? Inferno's got second mid or whatever, but it's a clearly distinctive different entrance rather than just a doorway that's right next door or whatever. So I think there's a lot, you know, but there are, at the same time, there's like that other path to get round to A. That feels totally pointless to me. I can't.
Like the little upper area outside of A. Yeah, that's so that you don't get spotted from a lower push potentially. Like that's
sure.
That's done intentionally so that if there's like aggro B presence, you know, not getting spotted from. I think there's a lot of stuff that makes sense on this map from that regard. Like, might seem redundant, but will be used because it has a niche. It fulfills a
yeah. Okay.
niche,
Sure. And I think, you know, there are a few that like the A bomb site. I think is going to be really hard to hold as a CT, to be fair, or maybe not, because like actually as you coming in as a T, there's a fair bit of immediate like verticality, but then also maybe not. There could be a guy up and a guy down. That's a different kind of crossfire. That, mate, that is different gravy trying to kill those two guys or whatever, right? So I think again, yeah, they have come in with the most recent maps. Especially, you know, Vertigo, Ancient, now Anubis, feel like nothing that's ever been done before. I think that, you know, that's a bit extreme, but that feels like maybe they at least want that as the subheading. It's like, oh, we've got a new map, and also it's like a new kind of gameplay. It's not even just a new look. It's like a new approach, you know, or whatever, right? And again, we will see teams come onto this map and they'll be specialists for a little while. You know, FPX and like G2 or whatever, when Ancient first came out, were rinsing everybody because they clearly, you know, put the time into it. I think Anubis will have a bit of that until it gets figured out. And I think that's kind of what they want. They want fresh gameplay, not just a new map. And maybe it is the effect of Valorant, because the fucking Valorant maps are like...
They're all gimmicky as shit.
Yeah, they're wild. They are wild. So
I was gonna bring that up. You were saying like, oh yeah, there's
earlier,
this map that has a fucking zip line, and I was like, my reaction was basically, yeah, you could have said anything. I would have believed you because that's how crazy they can be. But you know, I don't like how extreme it is in that context for Valorant, but I do like the idea that something different on each map is going to contribute to its gameplay, or at least is like a tool that is offered. You know, we think about simple stuff like the vents being popped on, you know, obviously there's Cache and Nuke. Now it's basically just Nuke. You think about squeaky doors and stuff, and it's like some doors you can blow up, some doors you can't. The differences between the maps and the tools that can be interacted with. I mean, you can go way back and think about, I forget the name of the map, Prodigy maybe, but there's like maps that you could have just like, you could hit buttons to open doors remotely or activate security cameras. And it's kind of, you know, on the one hand, it would be nice to explore stuff like that and see how could they actually be done in an interesting way. Maybe not those specific ideas, but something like them or something that is similarly out there. Ideally without zip lines and teleporters and whatever the fuck. But maybe even those should still be explored. I just also think that Ancient was a weird reaction to Valorant maps where everything it felt very similar to what everybody was telling me about Valorant, which is that you try to clear an angle and there's like 4 spots a dude could be, and you can't like clear them piece by piece, and that's exactly what Ancient felt like. So I don't know what's going on there, but
a couple of those on Anubis as well. To be fair,
sure.
Which
there's a few spots that people, especially as it's a
really
new map, and people will have to figure out.
Yeah, you have to go through the motions every so often, like figure out what timings are possible and all that shit. So.
My guy Mister's already done it, bro.
Yeah, I mean,
he's got a goddamn tweet out. Yeah.
I saw his post. Yeah, and he's got it down to some milliseconds. I feel like
that's a little.
That looked like roughly 12 seconds.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It was like 146.2 or whatever versus 140.
It's like a lot of people will just be like, that means nothing to me.
Yeah, who's faster? Who's faster, bro? Like T side or CT?
I just want to know if I get there first on best spawn.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
There is, of course, it's another map that just has water in it for some reason, But this one's a lot, like, I actually like the water on this map way more, because I can at least cosplay as a speedboat while I'm going through. It is a different approach to it, and I just think my problem is that water-based mechanics in CS don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This map, it'll be important as well, because the speed in which you travel has an impact on whether you make noise in going in or out of water. Like, jumping out, you're accelerating too fast, so you make a big old splash. If you crouch, drop into it, like the silent drop, if you are moving too quickly while you're silent dropping, you will splash. But if you move slow enough, it's fine, you're like a fucking diver,
Jesus.
Yeah, you're a diver, just like nice and quiet. So I do hate small things like that, and I don't know if that's something that could be changed to a certain degree to make it just like a bit more consistent, or like, you can only jump out of water silently if you're holding the shift key or if you're crouched or some shit like that. Those are the types of mechanics that will just end up fucking people over and just be weird.
Well, think about it this way.
Water's not really meant to be in CS.
Yeah,
So.
well, that is 100% true. But I would think about it like I actually want it to be more. I want something where you can run silently. That's what I want. I don't know if it should be water, but I want some map that does something. Funnily enough, there was a map, I forget the name of it now, but there was some really experimental map that had a conveyor belt where you would just be standing still and you'd be moving fast enough. And if you obviously started to like shift walk or full run, you would be moving very fast. But if you weren't full running, you weren't making any noise, but you're still able to move fast. Something like that could be interesting, where it's like, oh, I can actually like in this specific area, if I keep my feet to this area, I'm not going to.
Let me just catch the train real quick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Hey, Overpass has a train on it, and train is made of trains. Make one move around the map. So I don't know. There's stuff.
It doesn't block grenades.
Yeah, ideally, randomly. Yeah, ideally. So.
I don't know. It's always difficult. I think we're always good for a new map though, and they remove the big thing as well. They removed a right map. Might not be the right map. Everyone's going to be different, but they remove one that's in the argument. They didn't just fucking remove Mirage or whatever. Some people want Mirage removed, but I would say from a pro standpoint, again, Mirage delivers some of our best games. It's a bit solved, but it's solved in a good way.
Also, Dust 2 has only played like 2 times in the majors. So
yeah.
Really, the pros have made their statement. They can't be pissed that it's removed now.
Yeah, sure. And I think as well with Dust 2, it's kind of a curious case, because I think you're still going to get the same amount of motherfuckers playing it in MM, whether it's in active duty or not. To be honest, I think that, if you are the Dust 2 hardcore fan base, you're still going to play it. And that felt like that's exactly what happened when they removed it in 2016 or whatever. So, I think that it's a bit later than that, wasn't it? But whatever. I think that Dust 2 will still remain popular, still remain played. Whereas they have to be, and they might have seen this from Train. You have to be careful, because if you remove a map from the active and Cobble, right? You remove a map from the active duty, you just fucking. Sometimes you can just kill it. Like they literally just gutted Cobble. They started on, I don't know, like what's going on there? They started on a bit of a journey of changing it and improving it. in the process absolutely ruined the map, and now it's just like a wingman map. And there is there is
a Halloween map, bro.
There's a contingent of people who liked Cobble. I'd like to
lunatics.
I think all the Cobble love is purely nostalgic. Like,
sure.
This map a lot,
but
there was a lot of bullshittery. It gave some good games, gave some cool moments.
Yeah, but it's like it's just from. I'd like to play Cobble again. I'm sure we'd like to play Cobble again. You know what I mean? It's like Pro CS is one thing. That's obviously our main focus as a podcast or whatever. But you also have to, if we're trying to get into the minds of Valve, like what's going on? You just killed this map. It's like Cash is still kind of alive, right? That's still and then Train. I don't think any motherfucker plays Train ever. Not that they really ever did.
Don't you say slanderous word. We still play Train in the matchmaking queues,
Okay, well, I mean, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. How long does it take your ass to get into a fucking game, though? You know what I mean?
5 minutes.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, Train's gonzo. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to have to... And then it puts a lot of pressure on you, because it's like, if you want to bring Train back in as Valve the dev or whatever, you're going to have to change that map so well and so drastically to get everyone paying attention and playing it again. So you do have to be careful when it comes to removing maps. I think that is also... Yeah, if they removed a Mirage, it'd probably still get played a bunch. Yeah, Dust 2 and Mirage, Inferno maybe creeps in there as well, pretty safe. But if they removed an Overpass, which was, one of our famous theory crafters, Vu, he reckoned that, that was the map that was going to get removed, and...
Thank the Lord he was wrong.
Well, in a sense, yes, but yeah, if they had... Well, no, actually, I completely agree with you, but I'm just saying on the hypothetical,
Sure.
on the hypothetical that they removed it, I think that map also possibly could have died, because I don't know it's as popular in MM, because it is a little bit harder to play, to a high level. So you either have to be a really good player, or you just don't play
a team
it,
or some shit. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and all that kind of stuff, right? But if you're decent-ish at the game, like MGE, in the grand scheme, that's decent-ish. It's close to where I am, so
there you go. Big up.
I'm Ellie recently, to be fair. So I like the record to show. But yeah, anyway, so if you're around those kind of ranks, to be fair, I wouldn't even really play Overpass. I don't know any nades. Kind of need to know nades. I don't know any hot spots. Timings are all... It's a hard map. It's a hard map because it's fucking massive, So... So yeah, I feel like they have to be careful with which map they remove as well, and that is the one aspect. To give Valve their credit, I think they've nailed it. And I, for one, I know we've got our flaws on Vertigo and all this ancient, and yeah, it looks dodgy with the skyboxes flying over and all that, but I cannot stand watching Dust 2. I think it is so fucking boring. To be honest, that is like my... Because I think it's pretty solved. And especially a lot of the Dust 2 that I watch, as Michael's also saying, it's not really played at the top level at the moment. A lot of the Dust 2 that I watch is like tier 2. So they're not necessarily coming in with anything super original. It's like, one guy watch long. You like Russian long, or one guy watch long, one guy watch B tunnels, 3 guys go lower, hinge smoke, up short smokes, and give A go. Obviously, it's all going to depend on where, they might throw a bit of a mid to B fake in there. Saw that towards the death. That was pretty popular. That, you throw that one smoke and then it just pulls one guy into CT away from that A short hold, that A short attack that you're going for. So I just thought it was like, I don't play the game to a super high level. I obviously watch it to a very high level and study it, right? But I could probably tell you what a team is going to do on that T side based off of their spawns. It also did not help that, the game was a bit more CT-sided, or it is, but, for Dust 2, it was a bit more CT-sided, and this nade dropping thing, and, all this kind of stuff. They could keep mid on lock, and it's always been a bad fight either side. They tried to make a small change, didn't really change very much. You're still locked out of the B-bomb site if you lose one guy, and then they plant the bomb, and it's a 5v4, you're probably going to save there. So I just think Dust 2 was, kind of solved, kind of repetitive. The other maps that are in there might have a few flaws, but at the very least, they still deliver a few interesting games or a little bit of nuance in there. Vertigo still has a lot of A hits that happen and all this kind of stuff, so that's counter argument. But yeah, I
think the biggest point that's very similar to a lot of the critique you're levying at Dust 2 for me is actually Inferno. I don't know how people are still high on Inferno at this point. Since the grenade change, people have just been locking down banana the entire round. Yeah, let me just drop nades. Let me just drop incendiaries and smokes, and you could just go back on a fetch quest after you throw yours and hold it for a little while. Like at the top level, when you do have professional players that are really trying to win and trying to do everything they can, like the question of is this fun, is this engaging, is this skill testing, in the sense that I'm like being tested at the ability to hit headshots and the ability to make reads and all this other stuff. Like I don't find that to be particularly engaging. Look, having somebody look every now and then pan back to banana and there's still a smoke. Oh, there's still an incendiary, and that's just something that's been the case for a long time. And especially when A1S gets buffed and now you're smoke spamming all the time. It's like, well, now it's not just, there's a smoke. Now it's, there's a smoke and kills are happening through it. And it's like, okay, well, the least satisfying way you could kill a guy is probably through a smoke, honestly, for like the viewer experience, for you as a player. I don't see how that gets any rating at all. And I mean, I don't even know how you fix that, because that seems to be like, it was a map that was very interesting and led to really good games, great moments down the years. But this seems to have been fallen by the wayside as a meta change. I don't think you can alter the map based on that. I think now with the ability to drop nades and with that particular part being maximized, that's another thing that was obviously a faulty of Dust 2 is drop the HEs, drop the nades everywhere. We all remember the Alexi, maybe we don't all remember, but we all remember the OG Alexi B game, 800 nade damage or whatever the fuck, breaking records, like very first game on Dust 2 after the patch or whatever. And it's just stuff like that as absolutely egregious, and I don't even know how you get back from it. I think you probably do just have to dump these maps and move on, and maybe never pick them up again, because like, what are you going to do that's going to make it less valuable or less viable to just dump nades in a corner and then pick them up again?
It's so funny as well, because like Inferno was the map that saw the most change around the fact that you could chain smokes towards top banana, like that. The way the skybox operated intentionally, so you couldn't just like sit moto and throw smokes over to B and like have them chain. So
we're back, aren't we? We're back on like soft 4-man A gambles. In the same way.
And it's like the irony is the grenade dropping just brought it all back. Like we changed the map, but now we've changed the game so that we can do it again. So
I mean, I don't know. This is where that argument for like, I think we'll draw to a close soon here, fellas, because it has been a while, and this is a point that we've been over a few times with different guests and all that kind of stuff. But I think it does harken back to maybe changing the maps on a more regular cycle, because the unique thing that we have in this game is all these different maps. We're not just played on one map like a MOBA, right? And we have more than Valorant even, right? And we have more.
We're not bringing in agents and all this other like new items and all this other shit that people have to worry about.
Yeah, and that is not. It's like it is a balancing act in the other esports, where it's like that's part of the game. That's what the player base expects. So as a casual player, you have to keep bringing in these champions, keep things fresh, and power creep is a thing, right? And in League, it's like keeping the champions interesting. Again, it might be the case in Dota. They keep getting more and more and more intricate as years go on. You've got like from 2009, you have guy goes pull, guy goes knock up, and then he's got a W that makes him run faster. Like very simple. And then now you've got all these champions that have got so much text to them, right? And I think that it's something that in Valorant might start breaking the game, is that you have all these agents that come in, new agents, super strong. Everyone's got to play it or ban it, or they don't even ban at the moment, I don't think. So, you've got to play it. So we're in this unique position in CS where we can control the meta a little bit more if that's what Valve want to do. And I think that you can, you have maps on a rotation, but then we can also, with the more time that we've been putting into these maps, and we saw Dust 2 for many, this version of Inferno has been here for like 6 years, five and a half, 6 years. So, we can see that it's like, okay, this form of the meta doesn't really work, but if we tweak these certain things, that's going to make Inferno a pretty interesting map. So for now, we'll put Inferno on the shelf, because it's a boring map, it's repetitive, it's, and it doesn't quite fit in. But when 6 months down the line, we make this change that's going to make Overpass a bit redundant, maybe there's a bit too much nuance there, but I think that you can, if you really wanted to work on it as a game dev, you could marry the two things up, that it's like gun balance and I guess item balance in a sense, utility balance, can also go hand in hand with the way that you work maps into the system. So I don't know. The scope is there. This is all just hopeful thinking, but I think the scope is there for something kind of interesting. So Cool.
Agree.
Okay. There you are. There you are.
That's-
That was the
Fancy
floor
words to
open
say.
if anyone wanted to add it, but I think we are towards the end of our the end of our tether, I guess. We've been going for a while, longest episode yet. It's always nice to just about crack 3 hours, close enough.
Listen,
Maybe,
after all the cuts and all the almost moments there, I don't know, man.
Maybe-
yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
You might have to leave Yumi's expression in for a little bit for it to be longest.
just so people understand the context.
We reckon, because how long the Richard episode was, like 2:46, I think. In the
Oh
end?
yeah.
Something
So
like
we've
that.
cleared that then.
Yeah, we're just about, and we only had a few minutes of Michael's. I don't know, mate. Are you cool if that's just the thumbnail is just your face?
Yeah, I don't care.
Well, there's also a moment where you said, "I like memes," and that has to be clipped. So I can use that for later.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I have,
Sure.
there's a few good bits.
Yeah, I'll try and grab some from this one. Right, we're on a weird, because of the major and all that. We're on a weird timeline. I think we got to a point of doing like one a week pretty consistently. That it was like every Monday or whatever I was getting them out. But now it's gone a bit weird because, like I say, the major's been on and getting guests lined up and all that sort of stuff. Everybody's
Sure,
busy,
yeah.
so.
And
know,
now
we
it's
can-
entering into that talent break, into the player break. We'll get people. We'll get people.
Yeah.
No worries.
Maybe we should try a roundtable episode with a topic.
I
reckon
think
that
so.
could
I
be-
think it's
that could
about
be fun.
time that we see about a more than 3-man approach.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Well, there you go. There's your scope for the future, I suppose, set up for the off angle. But once again, we draw to the close of another episode. Thank you very much, Yumi, as always, for joining us. It is a great pleasure and obviously very easy to talk to you because we've been going for quite a while. But that is going to do us for this episode, folks. Thank you very much for watching, and we will, of course, catch you in the next one.